Yes, indeed, folks. You know that intro. You know what it means at this point. It's been 2 whole years of the Grin Grappler. Believe it or not, as terrifying as that may be, it's true.
Wow.
And we are here for another very special edition. A wrestler that kind of felt destined to be in the Grin Grappler archives at some juncture, right? It felt inevitable, and I think we've got a really great and fun lineup to delve into this evening. As always, your favorite expert panel awaits. Bobby Two Shoes in the building. How are you tonight, mate?
I'm doing well, man. Look forward to this every month. It's no different. We picked 6 good matches. Really excited to talk about them and get into it.
Yeah, unique selection here too. I noticed as we were going through this, the acts are like really tight together. Right, there's like a month between all the matches. That it's very very interesting the way it kind of came together, and I think we covered his career in a way that was fair, but also a little more positive than some other routes may have been. Nonetheless, Alex, I know you had a crazy idea or two when we were putting some matches together, but
Yeah,
we'll get into that. But firstly, how are you tonight, mate?
good. Excuse me. I've only ever sat on the couch for this one time before, so I might do some jostling to make sure get the best angles here. Good. It's a good day for physical media. It's a good day for Texas, as the Iron Claw and Blu-ray just came in the mail shortly before we came on the air here. Good. As always, excited to be here, and for as like. We have our group chat where we talk about the ridiculousness of levels that hyperbole reaches in wrestling, to the point sometimes with the modern fan bases where it kind of takes away what's fun about wrestling. And then I do this every month and I remember why I like wrestling. And so this is always something I really look forward to. And in today's case, an interesting one, because honestly, it's the tale of 3 different wrestlers. Each act of this is, even though they're separated just by, in some cases, like you said, months, there's a lot of difference in the 3 acts that we're doing here. So
Very much.
the mon is flowing. We got juice back in the game. So we're here to step it up a notch with the Grin Grappler. Someone's got to get color tonight.
Yeah, I agree completely about the kind of each act represent a different wrestler, which is great because, I mean, what do we cover here? Like 7 years worth? Which generally for Grin Grappler isn't a lot, right? We've covered a lot more than that. There's been some guys who've had like 20-year spans across the matches we've done. And I think what we'll get into here as we go is this is I think is a slightly complicated legacy in grappler in history. And I say that lovingly. We'll get into it more as we go. The Oracle of Wrestling, you'll be here for the ride as always.
Oh, yeah.
How are you tonight, mate?
I'm well. Just finishing up my dinner. I've got a nice big shake. I'm going to be flaunting in everybody's faces here in a minute.
Flaunting.
But yeah, I think I think this is definitely a unique one. I was thinking about it when we decided on it. We kind of picked the 3 best years of Hennig's career.
Yeah.
86 was really in a lot of ways his peak. He was awfully good in 87, 88, but AWA is its last great year is 86, so it's kind of fitting that we got those years. And I also got to flex to the boys last night. My physical media for
it's true
for the AWA matches, but yeah, and 90s kind of looked at his best year in the Fed, and then 93 is his comeback year, the one comeback year that everybody kind of looks at, with pretty good praise. So I think we've got his 3 best years here.
Yeah,
recovering.
Yeah, probably the most flattering way we could have done this, I think. And we will talk about the kind of more complex elements of Curt's career. The 90s are a fascinating time for him. I actually tried my best to get to note down the different comebacks that almost happened and then didn't.
94, 90, 96.
Yeah. Including a WCW one that is fascinating to me. Alex, what are you going to say, mate? Go for it.
Y'all are going to have to help me fill in the blanks, because there was a Lloyd's of London thing was a reason he stopped wrestling for a while, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's so... I mean, we'll get into more detail, but so basically, the back injury with him I think very obviously, visually, you can tell was a real thing, right? Like,
Yes.
SummerSlam 91, famously, he kind of gutted it out and did that match for Bret, and that's why they had such a strong bond. At some point, though, it definitely became a thing where he was trying to get, much like Rick Rude, trying to get promotions to kind of figure out the Lloyd's London thing for him, right? I believe the case. And I think that's why he flirted with a comeback during the mid-90s. Famously, there's the Triple H angle. I say famously, I think a lot of people don't even know that it happened or existed, but that was a whole thing that kind of just stopped before it got started, right? So
there's a couple things he did around that point in time that we'll circle back to, of teasing that he was gonna get back in the ring.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And again, we'll kind of, that all comes after our third act. So once we deal with the matches, we'll kind of just deal with the rest of Curt's career because it is relevant to the story. But nonetheless, we'll of course start with Act 1 as always. But first, I want to give everyone a background on kind of everyone's fandom when it comes to Curt Hennig, because he's someone who I'm sure has come up on the Grin, but at this point I think we've done 700 episodes on Spotify. So God forbid, folks, I don't remember what anyone said about Curt Hennig. I'm intrigued, Bob. Curt Hennig, fan, not a fan? And when did you become one, if so?
I am a fan. I didn't really become one until kind of, much later when the network came along, but he was there when I started watching. It was right when he came back. He came back at the 2002 Rumble, ended up in the Final Four, had a couple months of matches. He had the Austin match, which is very good, main evented Raw, and then, a couple other ones before he eventually got fired. And then, and then the next thing I really remember is, because a year later he passed, and, the tribute video, and then they kind of start showing moments, and then he was in Showdown Legends of Wrestling, so I kind of learned a little bit about that as well. And then once he got in the Hall of Fame, that kind of opened it up more, and he was in the video games more, and there was more going on with the internet at that time too, so you kind of learn a little bit more. And then once the network came, he was a guy that I kind of sought out quite a bit. And then last year, watching all of 1993, WWF, WCW, he's a big player, especially in WWF, like we'll talk about, a little bit later. And so, yeah, it's been a really interesting journey because, he was there when I started watching, but I didn't necessarily kind of grasp it at that moment.
Right. Which was very common then too, right? I think people may not realize now, but nostalgia was, I always reference when Heenan shows up at WrestleMania 17, a lot of that audience doesn't really get that's an actual huge thing.
Mm-hmm.
If the equivalent happened today, it would be a big deal to the audience. I think nostalgia is just consumed very differently by wrestling fans, and probably honestly, that's a commentary on more than just wrestling. Folks, as always these days, we are currently live on the Twitter, the Twitch, and the YouTube. Wherever you're watching, wherever you're most comfortable, please do proceed as you are. But as always, I implore you to give us one of those thumbs up gimmicks on the YouTube once you're done, because the archive lives there, and help us out some along the way. Oracle, I'm intrigued because you're the AWA aficionado here, so kind of give me a. Well, that feels like an insult, doesn't it? I don't take it that way. I think people will, but I mean it with love, because there's a lot of great wrestling in the AWA.
It's very underrated in a lot of ways.
It really is, yeah, because it's one of those promotions when you paint a bigger picture of it, it inherently becomes negative. But the wrestling product was very, very strong a lot of time. But nonetheless, give me a timeline on your kind of Curt Hennig fandom and ups and downs.
Mine. Starts out kind of similar to Bobby's in that I definitely remember when he was in the 02 Rumble, came back and worked TV, was on the roster for about 6 months. If I'm not mistaken, one of the first TNA pay-per-views we got on a Wednesday was one of the ones he was on. But I guess it was probably the Bret DVD, stuff like that. I started to see, Old Perfect, and then WWE 24/7 and stuff like that. Obviously, the vignettes are always very memorable.
Yeah.
But the things that really opened my eyes to Hennig were, so for my high school graduation, I got a Buddy Rose compilation.
As one does.
Yeah.
And it's 20 discs long. It's I'm on here, and he's just skinny Curt Hennig, and man, I'm damn, he's good as shit. And then a few years later, got the AWA 80 set, as one does. And he's incredible, man. And I was like, hold on. People don't ever talk about, like, 82 to 88 Curt Hennig. This guy's one of the best wrestlers of the 80s. Because, I mean, Mr. Perfect was a great gimmick, but it was also a gimmick, right?
Yeah.
And
kind of like kind of like Ted DiBiase in that way, right? Where there's a great wrestling career that comes before the gimmick. But proceed, Oracle, my bad. Okay, go for it.
No, you're good. And he's just, he changes the way he works. Very much so. And we'll cover that great detail here. But just discovering his 80s work was like, wow. And of course, I'm a huge WCW fan, and like, the stuff's not good, 97, 98, really. But I do enjoy the West Texas Rednecks. A gimmick again. It was funny. They have some good matches. Kurt's not in most of the good matches. He's usually just like at ringside or whatever for the good matches. Right. But it's a fun act. Not really something that's like going to bring, great knowledge about his career, but definitely the last like fun thing he probably did.
Yes.
But that's like his one like little bright spot in WCW, but that I've visited over the years. But I mean, just really for me, I always liked the perfect gimmick, but it was the exploration and kind of discovery of his 80s stuff that like was kind of honestly mind blowing 10, 15 years ago. Everybody was like, damn, this guy was awesome, because he just got, kind of just his image was that he was just mid-card guy who was good in the ring, and like then like when you go into the message board culture of like everybody's evaluating that stuff, it's very hit or miss, right? And a lot of it's kind of maybe even overrated. But when you discover all this 80s stuff, you're like, wait a minute, this is the real meat of his, real meat of his career. He was just a tremendous wrestler. Obviously the back problems were, probably added to his downfall in the ring.
I think so, yeah.
But just one of the most unheralded wrestlers from the 80s, for sure.
I have to ask the big question, Oracle. Did he make your greatest wrestler ever 100?
Oh shit, I can't remember. I'm pretty sure Curt did make my top 100 because I'd consumed the AWA set and the Portland or the
right.
Buddy Rose comp and stuff.
Because I remember him being very polarizing in those circles, and understandably so, because some of these like selling quirks, like I get it. So yeah, interesting indeed. Alex, I'm intrigued where you come in on this front, mate. Tell us about your memories, your experience with Curt Hennig. Go for it.
Well, gentlemen, I don't know if you realize, but this is a momentous occasion in the history of Grin Grappler. This is the first wrestler from the WrestleFest roster to be inducted into the hallowed halls of Grin Grappler.
Wow. History.
Now, I know y'all are a bit younger than myself. If there's anyone out there who's listening in my age range, or in the late 80s, maybe even early 90s, that WrestleFest arcade game, man. When you went to the arcade, it was The Simpsons, X-Men, and then eventually, Mortal Kombat when that came out. But that WrestleFest game is legendary, and an engine that they never owned. I don't think. I think it was a Japanese company that made it, and it was never ported. It was only in the arcade. I was always Earthquake because the fucking do the Royal Rumble and your Quake. You do the Earthquake splash. The screen shakes and shit. Let's see if I can do this. It was Hogan, Warrior, Slaughter, DiBiase, perfect. Big Boss Man,
yeah,
perfect.
Oh man,
it was Demolition, but it wasn't Axe and Smash. It was Smash and Crush, and then Jake the Snake, and then the Road Warriors were the final boss. You couldn't play as them, but if you played till the end, they were the tag team you had to beat the game. And it was in the big blue cage, and it used to be better. So,
what a roster they had in the early 90s, man. Good lord.
Yeah, it was a cool time.
I'm going to use that real quick to do a history of Curt Hennig in video games, and then I'll get to my memories. He debuted in the WWF Superstars for Game Boy. He was in WrestleFest. There was Royal Rumble for both the Sega Genesis and the Super Nintendo. And if anyone out there played those games, they're going to know what I'm talking about. They had different rosters. So Mr. Perfect was only on the Super Nintendo version of the game. Same with like Yokozuna and I want to say maybe fucking Repo Man. But then if you had the Sega Genesis version, you got like Rick Martel, I think Papa Shango.
Right.
So he's on there. King of the Ring for the regular Nintendo. They released a game for the regular Nintendo in 1993 titled King of the Ring. He was in it. Rage in the Cage, the only Sega CD game that the WWF released. And then here's a big one, In Your House, which was on the PlayStation and PC as a commentator. Him and Vince recorded commentary for the game.
That is insane.
Was he as bad on the game as he was?
That session must have been something else, brother.
Those old games were always like the plug and play, like just to like depending on the match was. So it'd be like, I'm telling you, McMahon, this Shawn Michaels is gonna win this tag match. Moving on, Revenge. He was an unlockable character. If you took out the NWO Black and White ladder, you could play as Curt Hennig. He was in Thunder, which is a terrible game. Mayhem, which is not good, but it was the first wrestling game that you could ever go backstage and fight. So it's historic in that context.
I had Mayhem.
Yeah. Electronic Arts. Hilariously, the one thing I remember is they had the Superman logo on Steiner's gear and didn't get clearance for it. And just had to work it out that way. Bob already mentioned Showdown, Legends of Wrestling, and then he's been in a million WWF games ever since they got his license. And specifically, Legends of WrestleMania. You like that game, don't you, Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mr. Perfect, and this is going to be an interesting journey for me because it kind of bounces back and forth as far as like my knowledge of him, because I was similar to Oracle, especially like I remember as a kid, Mr. Perfect, because I remember the bright singlets, and I remember he was the only guy who did that neck whip where he like flipped over the guy, and then he was the first guy I saw ever do the thing where his hands on the ropes and he gets kicked in the back of the leg and does a backflip out of it. I remember as a kid that kind of stuck with me. But the biggest thing I can say is my like first big memory of Mr. Perfect, like a full flushed memory. My first vivid memory of wrestling is WrestleMania 8 when I was 5, and I think I talked about that when we did the Piper episode. And then that fall, the first like big angle I remember was Randy Savage asking Mr. Perfect to be his tag partner, and like remember sitting on the floor in my house watching on Primetime Wrestling when Heenan slapped him, like, what's wrong with you? And then Perfect grabbed him by the collar and like poured the water on him and said, who the hell do you think you are? That type of thing. Because I thought that shit was completely real. I probably like gasped when he slapped Perfect. Oh, fuck. And so he has like some warm memories in that way. And, you know, I already went down the video games too. And that spans like my entire life of playing video games, is all those ones I mentioned. And yeah, I was never like a huge Mr. Perfect fan, but he was someone that was there. I associate him with that classic Intercontinental title design. Like he's synonymous with that in my mind. And then when he went to WCW, that was 97.
Yep.
And it is important that we call out, because he went to WCW, we got one of the greatest comedy segments in wrestling history when the NWO parodied Arn Anderson's retirement speech. But
not a liver spot.
My spot. Don't remember me how I used to be. Remember me how I look right now. To give you an idea of how different things were then and how quickly things moved, at least in the mind of a young fan, like he had been on WWF wrestling just a couple years before, but when he was in WCW, it was like, oh man, Mr. Perfect, he's old. Like, and because things moved so much faster then. And then he just was another guy in the NWO. And then, you know, so I took it as a personal challenge for y'all saying he didn't have any good matches in WCW, and we'll get to that because I went down a lot of them trying to find one. But
I just watched one the other day. Yeah,
I think I found the closest. We'll get to one. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But
He has a good
I'm
match in
laughing.
WCW. It's just, there's the name he has it against isn't the someone we generally avoid in the Grin Grappler because he comes up anyway, and yeah.
Well, I'd found one that's non-murdery, so we can talk
Okay.
about that when it comes to it.
Great.
Actually, there was another one I watched the other day. One that wasn't that bad either. Anyways, we'll
get to it.
And then he came back at the Rumble and he looked awesome. He had big barrel chest, but he still was like kind of doing the same shit and had that very weird run that like at the time I didn't appreciate how strange it was. And that's been like this past week, me just sending like screenshots of matches that happened to the group chat in 02. And I saw him at a Raw in Austin. He teamed with Test, and I think he took on Albert and somebody, Scotty Too Hottie maybe. And then his death was shocking, man. It definitely came out of nowhere. But then years later would go by, and I discovered most of AWA completely like removed from the internet and like message boards and shit. It was just kind of like my own research that I came across, and he's a completely different wrestler. It's crazy. Like it was one of the few times, that I watched someone's matches and there was like no trace to be found of what I knew of them up until that point. And, the matches with Bockwinkel obviously are unbelievably great. And just his work there and these matches we're going to talk about coming up. So he's someone I definitely took for granted in the overall scheme of things, just because as a young fan, those guys are always going to be there. They're never going to go away. They're going to be in another company, yada, yada, yada. So as an adult, his body of work, I'm really excited to talk about this because there's varying returns for me with as far as his wrestling style goes.
Yeah, and I think there's also a conversation that maybe isn't even suited to this show, but there is a conversation in terms of like the way he influenced certain guys in regards to bumping and making a show of bumping and kind of
I'm here to tell the world.
Yeah, I mean, it is like, and I think, you bring him up. I bring it up, you reference him directly. I think, Dolph would be the first one, or Nick, sorry, Busted Open host, Nick Nemeth, would be the first to like, give props to Kurt, and that was a thing, but I think you even watch throughout his career him kind of realize the issues with that, right? Like it's you can only do that for so long, man. It becomes a parody of itself. So yeah, we'll kind of get into some of the different more complex elements to Kurt's career, but nonetheless, I want to shout out my friend Kate who cheered 100 bits. She did that 15 minutes ago. I apologize for not getting to it, but we were discussing. Alex had a video game list to get through. I had a Dolph Ziggler reference to make. We had, this is a lot going on in the Grin Grappler land, but I hope you're well, Kate, nonetheless. All right. Let's get into it. As we mentioned, the acts are very tight. 86 is like a month between them. 1990, there's like 2 months. And then 93, there's generally like, 2-3 weeks between those matches. So you get a real look at this version of the wrestler, as Alex mentioned. We start on May 31st, 1986. Kurt debuted in 1980, I should know. And at the end of this act, as always, we'll talk about other matches from this era that are worth watching. But this one is one of those matchups that I think captures kind of the unique what AWA was capable of. Just like when you actually look at some of the pieces that came through, even at this time, right? Obviously, Stan Hansen's AWA title reign lives in infamy for other reasons. But here he is still the champion. He is set to wrestle Jerry Blackwell. They do a whole angle where Jerry's out and Curt Hennig's his replacement, and then Hansen comes in, and this angle bleeds into the match. Hansen has said in recent years, when reflecting on this run, that this was the guy he wanted to wrestle. Like, they would always put him with other guys, and he would always say, why don't we do the Curt Hennig thing? It's a natural matchup. I think you see that here, because this is not necessarily the kind of match that I'm sure a lot of folks watching this aren't familiar with Kurt stuff before WWE. This is, a million miles away from the Mr. Perfect that many folks are familiar with. Even as someone who's familiar with his AWA work, this is still an extreme example of how aggressive and how fiery he could be. It's a slugfest from start to finish, and a wild brawl in which Kurt kind of matches Hansen in his own game. Fascinating watch, Bobby. I assume it's the first time you'd seen this. What did you make of it?
Yeah, this is the first time I'd seen it. I had a great time with it, man. Obviously we have a little experience with Stan Hansen from Grin Grappler we did with him, so I kind of knew what to expect there. But the point you made about Hennig just being completely different in AWA than what I've seen of him, it's like night and day, man. Like he's got this just much different energy and just different style. And again, we'll get into that more, but like, they did a 15-minute draw here, and it just flew by. Like, that was the other thing, too. Just not a lot of downtime. Just everything was impactful. I was a huge fan of Hennig bringing him back inside the ring with the suplex and then covering him and getting kicked out all the way to the floor. Just a great pairing. And, I don't know if they have any other matches. I'm definitely going to try and check them out. I have a whole playlist of stuff I want to watch tomorrow that we didn't cover tonight that I didn't get to yet. But, it was a great time.
I believe they may have done something before this, but I think this is their last match together at the very least. And I mean, choices were made. This feels like something that should have been the centerpiece of the promotion. But
yeah, well, I know Stan had a weird relationship with the AWA, and
a little bit, yeah.
Well, I get 90%.
He classic in Hansen's book when he talks about like he would go to TV. And it would just be like list of squash matches, and he'd be like, "Are we doing any angles?" And Greg would be like, "Fucking amateur, we don't do it." What do you think this is, New York? And Stan was like, "Maybe we should do something to excite people for the matches." And Greg like told him, "You just wrestle. We'll do the booking, Chief. Don't worry about it." So this probably should have been a whole thing, but it wasn't, unfortunately. But nonetheless, there's a lot here in this 10 minutes. At one point, Curt throws a mule kick, which looks incredible. There's a monkey flip in there. It's wild and woolly, Alex. What did you make of this, mate?
That mule kick really, really excites Rod Trongard.
Yes.
Like, a mule kick. Who's the other guy in commentary?
Lord James Clears, who Trongard hilariously calls at one point Colonel De Beers.
That's it. That's where I got Colonel De Beers.
Yeah, which is layered. I mean, that's a lot. That's crazy.
Well, he says at one point that Stan Hansen's he's defended the title all over the world in Asia and Japan. Geography, brother. And man, you know who wrestlers don't look like anymore? Jerry Blackwell. That dude just looks like a fucking
He could
lumberman.
really go, dude.
Oh yeah, he was great. He couldn't read, but he could wrestle.
Great work.
I have a note for when Stan Hansen hits the ring that says, "Look at God." Just the way we waxed poetic about Stan Hansen for 2.5 hours a year or so ago, so I don't need to go on, but God, he fucking rules. Crowd is hot as hell. Ron Trongard, just unmatched in his he's like Perd Hapley. Like he believes in what he's saying, but he just doesn't know what he's saying. It's an amazing like concoction of commentary he offers. Yeah, there's one point though where Hennig power slams Hansen in from the outside. It's fucking tremendous. And mule kick. There's a Hansen blocks a sunset flip at one point, but I think he just boots him. But it's just like chaotic pace, and like I usually AWA specialized in the draws and the not actually in drawing, but in the matches going to a draw, and a lot of dusty finishes and shit. So this is kind of what I expected as far as a finish goes. But Hansen really going out of his way, and especially when you go back to the tales of Hansen, if he wanted to, he can make you look good, and if he didn't, he didn't have to. But just the way he's selling Curt's offense here, and the urgency, I think, is the word Oracle used in the group chat. It's not like the greatest match you'll ever see, but it's an interesting little like piece of what really worked at one point in time in wrestling. Like as far as just like could have put that match on kind of anywhere and it would have had that same response.
Yeah. It's also what could have been, right? Which there's a million of those in the 80s for AWA, of course. But it's like, again, I said it earlier, but like, I don't know how you watch this and don't immediately decide that is your territory for the next 6 months, right? It's. I mean, because Hansen, you mentioned it, Alex. Like, don't be fooled by kind of the swarming pace. Like, if he liked a guy, he'll give them a lot. He gives Hennig a lot. Again, as I said, he takes a monkey flip.
Yeah.
He clearly is ready. He's down to play ball with Curt. It's just, it should have been a lot more than it was. But for what it is, Oracle, this is a hoot and a half, isn't it? It's a great time.
Oh yeah, this was one of the great hidden gems kind of discovered in the AWA set, and it honestly actually finished super high on the set. Partly because it was, I think Hennig and Hansen became such big favorites for everybody that their one big match, is basically this one. And they just, it's a 10-minute challenge to get the big Jerry Blackwell angle. It sets it up and just for the sake of it, the Hansen Blackwell match later on in June might even be the same date as the 6-man we watched. Is quite good, but yeah, they like, man, they're just full frenetic pace. There's a desperation and a grittiness and a fire to it all, and of course, Hansen is always going to be. You have to earn everything with Stan, right? We talked about that in his Grin Grappler now, which is what, like 2 years ago now. Crazy, but it's, I don't know. They go back and forth. It's Curt really trying to show himself, prove himself. It's a really nice setup for what we get later in '86 with the Bach feud, and then Hennig being the top guy in '87 and '88 right before he leaves. But some of the stuff I liked the most were like, of course, the spot that we mentioned where Hansen kicks out and throws Curt out of the ring. The body slam into the chairs in the front row, and then like Curt's neck gets caught up underneath, like inside one of the chairs. Hansen kicks out of a pin attempt with a headbutt to Curt's face, which is like incredible.
He was so awesome at that, dude. He would always do like quirky kickouts. He would always do stuff like that. It's great.
Which was like fucking awesome. Yeah, this is just like this is a really great example of what Curt Hennig was, which is like he was just a fighter, man. Like AWA Curt was just a fighter. Like he had such a fire to him, and dude could work stiff too. Like he has like a feud with Wahoo or something from like '87 or '88, and like I don't love those matches, but like they're beating the shit out of each other with like
chops and stuff.
It's like a strap match and shit. Like he's a totally different wrestler here, but like he's so much better also in many ways. Although the '93 version is quite good, and we'll talk about that. But he is, I don't know, man. Like sometimes it's like, man, he's stuck in the AWA. If he could have been anywhere else in '86,
right?
What could have been.
Well, it's also I often wonder about what if he jumps in the other direction, right? Like, it's one thing teasing him being a horseman in '97, but like, what if that's what happened in '88? Like, it's just interesting to kick those things around. Like, I don't know. I also wonder how much of it is that he was just a better babyface worker, like that. Yeah. I do think that's like a play here, because that's the the '93 run. That's the secret there, right? Like. He's a babyface. Now, granted, in the match we're going to close with, he's a babyface who is really working heel within the framework of the match. But I do think there is something to be said for the heel role in particular, kind of making Curt think the only way he could operate in WWF was take huge bumps for these monsters that were going to, basically beat the shit out of him the entire time. It's different. I think the Doink match, our friend Joe in the chat, who I know loves the Doink match, I had to get in here just for him. I love it too, to be clear. But I do think you see flashes of this dude, when like we'll get to him. I was mentioning to you guys earlier, like there's a great moment where Doink like hits him with like 2 kicks. And you see Kurt's face as if so like, and he just shoots a takedown, starts beating the hell out of Doink on the floor. Like, You got to earn it, brother. You got to earn it. But yeah,
Well, in
tremendous.
that case, I mean, we'll talk when we get to that. I think there might have been some tempers flaring in that one.
As it should be, right? It's
Yeah.
I was joking around with you guys about this earlier, but that's like wrestling, dude. Like give and take, right? Like if someone's beating the hell out of you in there, I think you should probably fight back. This is professional wrestling.
Mm-hmm.
There's a match from like 05 TNA. It's a 4-way, but there's this part in it where they're all just doing shit, and Alex Shelley and Roderick Strong, like one of them, I think Roddy's not expecting it, and Shelley comes up and slaps him in the back, like chops him, and Roddy turns around and like paintbrushes him, and so Shelley just slaps him in the faces. And there's this moment like they throw a couple strikes at each other, and then they just stop and stare at each other and realize it's fake bullshit, and they're like, all right, sorry. But that's when wrestling's at its best, when guys get pissed off at each other, man.
Yeah, it's because a lot of it is. There was a great video recently. I sent it to you, Alex, with one of your indie favorites, wrestled Maven. And I'm going to leave the indie favorite unnamed in case you want to protect your brand. I don't know where you stand on that matter at this point. And it's a video about how brother puts his foot on Maven's chest, and Maven immediately stands up and beats the shit out of him because in professional wrestling, at every moment you're protecting your own standing with the audience. Right? It's the kid. Yeah, you should. The kid in the front row. You don't want to look like a pussy in front of that kid in the front row. They got to cheer you in a minute. When you make your comeback, they got to believe in you. And I think you see that these Hansen matches are such a great example of that, dude. Like, it's a very simple situation here, basically, right? You can either let him eat you alive and beat the hell out of you, or you can accept he's going to beat the hell out of you and try and fire back some along the way. Curt chooses the latter, and we get a hell of a match as a result. A very different match up next, though, right? Just under a month later, June 28th, 1986. As we get to cover here, kind of like a long route to cover something that we covered before on the Grin. It was actually on the charity stream, right? The 24-hour stream, I think it was. We did the Midnight Rockers and the Rose and Summers feud, which is one of the all-time classic tag feuds.
Is that the one that has the cage match?
The cage match, the famous one, is the one with the juice on TV, where where it is a bloodbath. Yeah,
yeah.
It's a classic.
The same venue of the Hansen Curt match.
Was that the brawl in St. Paul?
The Christmas match was, right? The cage match.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just watched that the other day on the AWA set, and yeah, Sean, man, good lord, mass transited himself.
Matches are an incredible piece of history. They're famous within a bubble, but they're not really known, really. And I implore everyone to watch it. If you go to latenightgrin.com, you can maybe even still find, I think you can, our grin along of them. And I think the matches are on the screen. I don't think Jerry McDevitt got us for that. So go check it out, folks. But yeah, they're involved here, of course. Curt Hennig and the Midnight Rockers versus Rose Summers and Alexei Smirnoff, sorry. And this is on AEW Collision for anyone keeping notes at home. As the classic, like, in all seriousness, this is one of my all-time favorite. And this is a timeless wrestling TV thing. Like, just like the top acts pair up for a big 6-man, 8-man tag main event, whatever it may be. And it's just wrestling, isn't it? Like, you can do this at any point in history, and it's fun. Granted, I think WWE in maybe the late 2000s, early 2010s maybe leaned on it a little too strong. I know that the Shield stuff is a different category. I mean, like the sort of all-star combinations. But there's always a novelty to this. But forget the novelty. The work here is just staggering. My God. Oracle, you called it out first, so I'll let you go here. In many ways, this is the Buddy Rose match, who is
my God,
a force of nature. Go for it.
For that ridiculous 20 disc set that I got, let me tell you something. There will never be, ever, in the history of the sport, somebody who could run the damn ropes like Buddy, like fucking Playboy
Freak,
Buddy
dude.
Rose.
Freak.
That fella is literally, how they do like the Braun Breaker vignette they did last week on SmackDown, where he's like, look how fast you run the ropes. And it's like, it's impressive. But let me tell you something. Eat you some cheeseburgers and go back in there and run that, because that's what fucking Buddy Rose is doing, brother. He's in there. Unbelievable. unbelievable in this. His timing, just tremendous. He's in there with 20-year-old Sean and 22-year-old Marty, and he's literally, they're trying to keep up with him when he's running the
It's
rope.
insane. Yeah.
It's nuts.
How about his rebound cell after they do the arm
Yes.
wringer? Then like he just goes flying into the air. It's incredible.
Yes. Just an absolutely incredible wrestler. Legitimately one of the best to ever do it. One of the most underrated ever. Tell you what, Doug Summers. Nobody takes a back body drop better than he does, huh?
Wow. Did you hear Greg's reaction on commentary? You could tell he lost it. He actually got excited. It was like, whoa. Yeah.
I mean, good Lord. Sean and Marty, they were special back then.
Yeah.
But this was another good
Sean,
example of Hennig. He could bring the fight, man. Like he threw a couple of strikes in this that were fucking mean.
Yeah. His shine that he leads with is like awesome, dude.
He comes in and starts kicking ass. Just, we get like a double face shine. We get, we get face in peril and awesome stuff, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Great.
Again.
The finish is outstanding.
Yep.
And I love that they go back and actually show the replay of the dive, to cut off the save there. But just a tremendous match. A match that I remember thinking this match was awesome, but I forgot how good this was.
Yeah.
Buddy Rose is just, and let me be clear, Curt is awesome in this. Like his shine is tremendous in this, but Buddy Rose is like on another level. Like, my God, what a wrestler!
Buddy being the highlight of the match is more reflective of him than anyone else. I mean, there's a lot of strong performances. He's just that good here. There's a Greg, to his credit, Greg Gunn, you're not often correct, but he's Shawn Michaels' cell age pretty well, right? As like he made a point.
By the way, sorry to interrupt, Joe, but Rod Trongard.
Shawn Michael.
Make up your mind. Shawn Michael or Shawn Michaels? Ladies and gentlemen, Shawn Michael.
He is unbelievably funny every time. Bob, I know you was excited. That was like your main hook for this episode was Trongard is in the archive.
It was. It was. And, it was nice to hear from him. But, this match...
no longer speculation. Sorry, Bobby.
No, you're good. Orca really kind of laid it out with Buddy Rose, but the thing that kind of stood out for me, in addition to that, just the pace and like just speed and intensity the babyfaces are working wasn't really common in wrestling back then. So you kind of see how things are going to be in the next, 10 years or so, and it was incredible. They start, Hennig starts and body slams all three guys, just sets the tone right there, and we're just off from there, and it was a blast.
Absolutely. It's always funny going back and tracking the super kick, right? Like watching this. Because like here he does, it looks good, but he does it like a back elbow here, right? Like he just...
You got him like the chest.
Yeah, he just hits him with super kick and then he tags and they carry on with the match. It's just like a small transition within the match.
We've come full circle then if it's a transitional move.
Right. That is like a genuine thing that's happened. Because I do think... People think Sean always uses a finish, but it's very like you actually watch it. It's not the case at all.
The super kick was the setup for the teardrop suplex. That was his original finisher.
Yeah.
Fucking study your Hasbros, people.
Another one for the list of great sentences that have emerged on this show tonight. But anyway, Alex, what did you make of this 6-man collision main event?
Playboy Buddy Rose entering to Madonna is pretty fucking fantastic, man.
Yes.
And Sherry, she doesn't have much to do here, but anytime we get a chance to put over Sherry, we'll definitely take it.
The best. Yeah.
Tremendous. Ron and Greg on the call, and Greg just plugging all the cities they're going to be in. Honolulu. Fucking nerd. That reoccurring graphic, the ESPN Live graphic over old school pro wrestling is just fucking beautiful, man. It's fantastic. I love it. Shawn Michael, which I noticed is like a reoccurring thing in the AWA set I was watching last week. And there's Shawn Michael. And yeah, there's an incredible exchange with Sean and Buddy, and Oracle already kind of detailed it, but it's like it's this weird thing, Buddy. Like when he's hitting the ropes, the like look on his face. It's something you would see like by modern standards, like a Kevin James joke or something, because it is funny. It's this big fat dude who gets locked into like, I'm going to be more athletic than this guy. So he's got like this really serious look on his face while he's bouncing back and forth. And, it's something that like if Chris Farley was a wrestler in a movie, he would do something like that. And it's, but the difference being Buddy's hitting those ropes like they fucking owe him money, man. It's beautiful. Buddy is someone that I remember early in our friendship and me knowing Oracle, him saying like he thought Buddy was like one of the all-time greats, and we weren't in a place yet where I felt like I could call him out on anything, but I've done a lot of retrospective viewings of Buddy Rose since then, specifically a lot of Portland stuff, like when he teamed with Dynamite and shit, and he Joe likes to say one of one, and he was certainly a very special talent for what he was capable of doing, and that shows here. The heel work just all around is really tremendous. There's a part where Curt has one of them in an abdominal stretch kind of close to their corner. They reach in and rake his eyes to like break it. And we're talking about Curt here. And so what I want to talk about here before we move into the second act is his selling is very grounded and his aggression is very real. Those are two things we will not see in at least the next act. And there's some taters in there, and he's just got a fire in that interesting 80s style Barry Windham fire too, of like, yeah, I'm a pretty boy, but I'm here to let you know I can beat your ass. Like it's not, you think of like kind of like the Rock and Roll Express, that 80s style of like pretty boy, and their offense is just really more shiny than anything. And here, and I mean that, bubbly.
Right.
And here, Curt, comes across as a badass. Sean is easily the greenest of anybody in this match, and but he was 20, and depending on who you talk to, he turned into a decent wrestler. Marty, what I texted y'all earlier, it always bums me out watching Marty wrestle at this point in his career, because God, he was a fucking just unbelievable babyface worker, and he obviously is problematic, would be a bit of an understatement.
Yeah, very unfortunate person.
It's pro wrestling though, baby. What do you expect? Great finish. Like nothing drives me more insane in modern scrambles or 6-man, 8-man tag teams when it's the finish, because everyone just stops doing stuff and watches the pinfall. I just love Sean does that dive over the top rope, and it's so like the chaos continues to the point where only like part of the crowd registers that it's a 3 count. And I know people that run televised wrestling would have like a panic attack of that mere notion, but it's like, come on, man, that makes it seem more authentic. I love it. For those of you who watch this match on YouTube, we are greeted with a graphic that takes us to commercial of the Remco AWA figures in the toy ring. That, God, that's, if I was rich, one of the things I would take up is 1, collecting sneakers, and 2, AWA Remcos, like mint on card would be the things I would take up. We get a promo where Curt sounds awesome, Marty sounds fantastic, and Sean sounds like he's shitting his pants being on a live microphone. And then the one I watched just continues on to where who is their ring announcer, Oracle?
Oh God, Larry Nelson.
Okay, he offers a preview of Wrestle Rock, and he introduces Frank Binder and the Soul Patrol, and like it shows them on stage and the Rockers are with them. But before the band starts playing, you hear a guy like close, I guess, to one of the cameras that has its mic on. He goes, "Big deal, let's see some wrestling." And then another guy who's clearly drunk as shit goes, "What happened to the other matches?" And then this band starts playing, and then the YouTube video ceases. So a clean finish, which is, what we just mentioned, is kind of out of the ordinary for AWA. And much like the first match, a special snapshot of a point in time for a very specific promotion and the careers of very specific wrestlers.
Yeah, I gotta be honest, fellas. You were starting to convince me on this Buddy Rose thing, but I just did my independent research. Went to cage match. Buddy Rose 6 flat, a whole point below both Alexa Bliss and Commander. So make that what you will. So there was a 1-2 punch there. I had to get my
Why'd you
monthly
do that?
reference. And
Why?
Where's
Well,
Kevin
just-
Koo at in all this?
Oh,
Anyway, moving on. Is there okay? Other matches we need to call out from this act. Obviously, the Bockwinkel matches are like they're the most famous non-WWF Hennig matches, right? The Broadway in particular. The Broadway, I think, is honestly one of the matches of the 80s. It's an incredible match. We talked about it a little bit on the Late Night Grin on Friday. Go check that out if you missed it.
It's one of the only hour-long matches I've watched multiple times.
It is like it has to be one of the greatest hour-long matches, I think, in terms of actually
The funniest
flowing.
part about that match is when Rod Trotgard blows it and basically totally says they're going the full 60 right at the start.
Of course, yeah, of course he would.
Yeah, the rematch is awesome too because it's completely different, and like
Yeah.
Bockwinkel's fantastic in that.
I like their match, that whole series in general. The Broadway is just like the famous one, right? It's fair to say, and the best one. But
What's the one in the Cow Palace where Kurt wins the title and Zabisco
That's
all a quarter?
Super
Oh,
Clash
dude.
2.
that house is crazy. That's the one where it's like every shot they take, there's like thousands of empty seats. It's a wild visual.
It's awful. But
Yeah.
that's the one on the WWE's AWA set. Because I just love just that story of Hennig tries to stay to his morals and like his standards, but nothing
Right.
he can do can beat Bockwinkel, so he gets the roll of quarters and punches him in the head.
And then he becomes Cool Kurt then, right? When he's a heel, and he's
Yeah.
kind of a horseman at that point, right? He's doing like a sort of Ric Flair cover act, and he's very good at it. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy him in that run. He's the champ for around a year until he leaves in mid '88, and famously he drops the belt to Lawler, which is a match that's very much worth watching. Jerry
When,
Lawler, that was a big deal, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
Lawler had never been able to win the NWA belt, and so they got that deal done, and he won the NWA belt.
Trying to think of like, all right, an alternate timeline in which Gino Hernandez isn't potentially murdered. When Arn and Tully leave for the WWF, Gino and Kurt come in as the new two horsemen.
That's what I was trying to figure out. Because when do Arn and Tully leave?
87? Late 87? Because they're at Mania 5.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. That would be late 88. Excuse me, not 87.
Yep.
Okay, good. Because that was breaking my brain a little bit. Because I was thinking, okay.
Were they
So-
on the first Survivor Series?
I believe so. In the tag one.
What, in the
No,
20 man?
No, the first Survivor Series is 87. No, they weren't.
Okay, so they come in 88. Because remember, the rumor was there was a lot of talk about Flair being at SummerSlam 88. Remember that was like the big thing, was the idea that Flair was going to jump too, which is another one of those like mind melting scenarios to kick around. But yeah, I mean, he would have been a natural. I mean, like, because I think fairly people are upset with the angle in 97, but like, let's be real, like, you know, the fate is sealed at that point. The Horsemen are going to be what they're going to be at that juncture.
Oh, yeah.
In 1988, Curt Hennig as a horseman would have been something else, but it was not to be. So yeah, Bockwinkel and Lawler. Other matches from this first act, fellas. I know there's some Portland stuff, Oracle, that you were kind of pondering, right, to put on the list.
Basically every Bockwinkel match you can find.
Yeah.
The Lawler matches from '88 are great, especially. I remember one being really awesome. It's probably this one. Look at the AWA results here from the '80s set. July 12th, 1988. Lawler and Hennig.
What was the one I sent y'all? I watched it. And it was fucking great. It was a 6-man in Portland where Dynamite and Buddy were on one team and Kurt and the big payoff angle was Dynamite Kid broke Curt Hennig's neck and like they did.
Yes, that's a classic. That match is awesome.
Because they do something too where they have like the old school stretcher where the guys go to pick it up and leave, but they run off the doctor.
Right.
So Dynamite does like the diving headbutt onto Kurt while his neck is broken. And good shit.
Absolutely.
If you ever want to see something that's really not good and it will boggle your mind just because of it on paper, Curt Hennig and Nick Bockwinkel against Tenryu and Shiruda in Japan, in All Japan. And I'll circle back to this after Act 2. Hennig in Japan just did not work.
Yeah. What was the famous case of that for the AWA belt? That it was like the end of the All Japan AWA relationship. Was it with Masawa? I want to say it was with Masawa when he's doing the gimmick. It's a Korakuen, I think.
He would have still been Tiger Mask too.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
I was trying to remember if he was still
Jumbo.
Tiger Mask.
Jumbo wins the AWA title.
What year is that?
85, featured with Rick Martel.
Yeah, because they had a relationship, right? Okay, so okay, I'm correct here. So I want to say the Tiger Mask Hennig match killed their relationship because they do like a count out finish. And
Vern, what's the problem?
But Tiger Mask wins by count out, and the fans are very confused. There's not a title change. I want to say is the story.
Looks like that's from the very start of 1988, so that would all line up timeline wise.
Okay, thank you, Alex. Yeah, I thought so. And that match is another case of what you're talking about, Alex. Of like, yeah, it was not a good fit at all.
I found another one.
Good.
I couldn't remember if it was a tag or singles, but I know it's got to be the singles. Curt versus Mr. Saito from March 28th, 1985. That match rules.
Oh my! I'll have to check that one out. Okay. Any others from Act 1, fellas? Are we good to proceed here?
Just the closing recommendation that if you're not familiar with Curt's pre-WWF work, I think the round table agrees it's worth checking out.
Yeah, it's his physical prime, and it's also a presentation that like really suits him. And don't get me wrong, he adjusted to WWF wonderfully well. Like the skits and the vignettes, they were great. They're iconic. But I think we see it again in our last match on this show, which is like, man, when you give Curt like a sports style framework, that really suits who he was, I think, as a wrestler, you know? So, yeah, interesting stuff, folks. Hope you're enjoying the show, whether you're on the Twitter, the YouTube, the Twitch. Yeah, Curt Hennig, Act 2. Okay, so he drops the AWA title and he debuts on TV in September 1988, this is one of those another classic cases of like wrestling timelines were different then, right? Like his actual real run is like 3 years long. The classic run is 3 years long, and it's like nowadays you have to be in the company for 12 years before you get a run on TV. So it's very different. There are fellas that wrestled on NXT tonight that have genuinely been like signed to WWE for like 5 years. You know, like it's a different time. But nonetheless, we actually get started with Act 2 2 years into that run. October 30th, 1990. This aired on November 23rd. Is WWF The Main Event, I believe 4, which is one of the NBC specials. And he's wrestling one of my personal favorites, the Big Boss Man. Big Bubba in the house. You're on Grin Grappler. All-time great theme. Speaking of a guy who, being a babyface, was like a secret sauce. Like his energy as a babyface is so awesome, dude. I mean, he's great regardless, but Bubba is just a treat. And the angle here is that Heenan insulted Boss Man's mama. And there's this whole Heenan shtick that comes into play later on in the match. But this is an interesting one because I think Meltzer gave this like 3 3/4 at the time, which I'm not saying it's a knock, but at the time in the World Wrestling, that was like a big deal because it's like an 8-minute WWF TV match. But their energy here is just wonderful. And I think Bubba was a great opponent for Hennig's big over-the-top bumping because Bubba is so animated in himself. He's a cartoon character, you know?
It works so much better in this match than it does in the next one we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, it's a real natural fit. There's a great moment that I clipped and tweeted out there where Hennig does a cartwheel and immediately gets clothesline for his troubles. More of that, please. If a gentleman does a cartwheel in a wrestling ring, please immediately be clothesline. That's the way heels should be handled at all times. It's great stuff. Lots to like here, Alex. What did you make of Boss Man and Hennig? Go for it.
Absolutely, man. We have Piper on the call, who the match starts with like I was in confusion for 5 minutes and I had to go back because Vince says, Bobby Heenan's watching this somewhere and he's probably shaking in his boots with Big Boss Man trying to get after him. And then Piper goes, that's not all he's doing in his boots. I'm like, what the fuck does that mean? And so I lost the opening stanza of this match trying to figure out what the hell Piper was talking about. We already mentioned Boss Man's entrance theme. My dad used to live in Virginia, and when he would drive to Texas, he'd have to cut through Georgia, and it was just a bit. It only happened a few times, but he would always send me a picture when he went through Cobb County, Georgia, and he would send me the picture and say, "I hope I don't serve hard times." So this era of wrestling, my dad has a decent knowledge of this, and like Boba Brazil, because that was his guy growing up. But yeah, man, we're in full Mr. Perfect, the GIF mode here, what everyone knows him for, as far as like over the top selling. He does takes a header into the buckle and does like a fucking Phoenix senton out of it, and it just punches. He's flying all over the place. He's getting lightly Irish whipped and flying over the ropes. But to the point we made just a moment ago, it works in this because Boss Man is one of those really over the top golden era characters. When we move into our next match, and I'll kind of circle back to this, when you have one of those guys who's supposed to be more of just like a real badass, when the dude's throwing himself into a post, it looks kind of stupid. Here, Boss Man, he's a cop that's come to the World Wrestling Federation to enforce justice. It's like, all right, so this works. And also, Boss Man, to his credit, he tries to hang in there with the selling, because there's a part like where the back, he's selling it, and we get a sick version of Hennig's neck whip, but he does it reverse.
Yes.
So like Boss Man,
that
goes
was
backwards.
gnarly, dude. Good God.
It was awesome. But so Boss Man's on all fours trying to get up, and Hennig goes and does the thing where he just kind of kicks his legs out and jumps on his back with his butt, and Boss Man screams out in pain. He's just like you can hear it over Vincent Piper's microphones. It's awesome. Boss Man's punches, one of my favorite things that happens on Twitter, without fail, every few months, someone will discover Boss Man's All Japan work and see him giving Misawa one of those corporate cane uppercuts, and they're like, "Oh my God!" And here's no difference. And the way he kind of winds him up, and we go on every episode about how no one really has a good working punch anymore, and it's just it's always fascinating to go back and watch at a time where that was like, you had to have a good working punch, and
mandatory.
Guys, threw them differently, and I really like Boss Man's. And then Heenan, comes in and interferes, and I'm not breaking any news that Bobby Heenan was an extremely funny performer. He's like sprinting like the 100-yard dash to get away from Boss Man at the end of this. It's so fucking funny. And then he gets back and he's begging Okerlund to kind of talk him off the ledge and help him out with it. And, this is above average for the time period for a TV match, but as far as like crowd investment and the effort both these guys give it, this is like, some people may have a hard time believing this was kind of close to par for the course at this time with those television shows and television tapings and whatnot. But yeah, it's great. It's the things I don't like about Mr. Perfect and the execution that he had at this point in time work in this, just because the whole match is kind of over the top and it all kind of clicks. So thumbs up on this one.
Yeah, even to the Heenan stuff, right? I agree. It's a natural fit. One note, Alex, I don't know if you got the memo, but we don't call it the cane uppercut anymore. That's now the Big LG Doc Gallows, just so you know, because we changed it legally. Yeah,
I love it.
Bob's got the documents. Bobby, what did you think of this wrestling match?
I thought it was great. Alex kind of laid it out perfectly. And this is the sort of thing that people were tuning in to Saturday Night's Main Event or the main event for, and in turn, kind of the guys would bring it more because 25 million people would end up watching it. So it was a big deal, and it was tremendous. We included it, and it kind of felt out of place with the rest of the matches we had, but I think people kind of forget how good Boss Man was in that first WWF run as well, and he fit perfectly here.
Boss Man is... There's just a weird thing with any big man wrestler that isn't Vader. Just because Boss Man doesn't have a collection of 5-star matches, like that wasn't the point of the Big Boss Man. Like watch his performances, dude. Like
he had a really good match with Vader in WCW also.
He did.
Watch those other two Jack matches.
Well, I don't know about that, but folks, it's a running joke. I swear it wasn't. I love it. I'm a huge, for anyone who doesn't, it's the case. I'm a huge Bossman fan, but I like draw the line at a certain point where I think he's a great character, but I no longer enjoy watching him wrestle. But there is, as Oracle can speak to, there is a contingent that is very ardent in their belief that he's actually fucking awesome in 2002 on Jacked, and I've tried. I can't do it. Him and Hennig actually team up a little bit, right?
Yeah,
they do.
Was that when he was doing the Bundy thing where he wanted the 5 count after matches? I remember seeing him. He worked a dark match in Austin before one of the Raws, and he worked with Rodney Mack, and he did the Bundy gimmick. And yeah.
My apologies for the detour, folks. But yes, Bubba was awesome, and he was great very quickly. He was a complete natural. Freak athlete, famously got the gig, right, because he took the slingshot suplex gimmick that Tully used to do in a job match. That was where he got the gig, and they were like, whoa, this dude can move. And
took a suplex off the top of the cage from Hogan onto the concrete ring.
Him and Hogan had some terrific matches in the World Wrestling Federation, brother. They really did.
He was also in WrestleFest, so, bona fide legend.
Most importantly, exactly.
Most importantly.
Yeah, and while we're on the Bossman topic, one of Mattel's greatest ever action figure plays when they made a chase variant of the Big Boss Man, and it was the Boss from World Champ. The 1 month in WCW he was allowed to be the Boss, and it's like all black, the yellow logo. Look it up, Alex.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I've been in pursuit.
Like when he wrestled Rude at Starrcade.
Yeah, because like when he first comes in, there's like the legal stuff, and then obviously becomes the Guardian Angel, which I'm still waiting for that figure. But yeah, there was like a normal Boss Man, and they made a chase for that run, which is funny.
We're already here, so it's off the rails at this point. All Pro Joe, if that's the match I'm thinking of, that's the one from Bash at the Beach '96 where the pole is too high, and so Jimmy Hart has to climb it. That match fucking rules.
him and Tenta, who's another big man who, again, you can't just look at the match list. Watch the dude's performance. Tenta was tremendous, man. He really was. That particular year is maybe not much flattering, but he really was tremendous. Nonetheless,
I'm not
Oracle of Wrestling. What did you think of this match?
Oh, I thought this was excellent, man. Like, I'm not even sure if I've ever seen this one before. I mean, I've known of it. But yeah, I mean, just here's the thing about Hennig and his. I'm not a huge Mr. Perfect fan from like '88 to '91. But he was unique and he did stand out, right?
Yeah.
Nobody bumped like that in WWF. No. Nobody moved like that and bounced around the ring like that, like he did. Especially as a heel. And it fit really well within the era. When you're breaking it down, sometimes it can get and that's certainly the case, although we'll get to it. I don't entirely blame him for all the flaws in the next match, but yeah, this was it fit really well. Bumping like that for Boss Man makes a little more sense. The story kind of calls for it, right?
Yeah.
Boss Man selling, I just have to mention it again. Terrific. That like little blockbuster neckbreaker snap that he did, and like Boss Man, like as Alex mentioned, was just brutal looking. Oh my god!
How did he do that without his legs just exploding? It's a big man.
I don't know, man.
He like coils his arms in, like he got rocked really bad too. It's tremendous.
Mm-hmm. And then of course, Boss Man's favoring his back like the rest of the match, and like I imagine it's mostly selling, but at the same time, I'm like, man, he really took a nasty fold there. I mean, he definitely might be in some pain, but really, really, really fun match. The finish with Heenan was great. Heenan, like, with his like, looking like he's like, some like annoying club owner on like a Miami Vice episode with his fucking.
What a beast, dude.
He sprints, and they do this great like Wile E. Coyote deal where he goes backstage and he slips.
He falls down there.
Tremendous stuff.
I laughed out loud at that, dude. Genuinely.
Did you watch the whole thing? Because he's backstage, and then The Rock shows up and throws a trash can at him and bloodies him and throws him into the side of a bus. calls him boy 5 times.
Sounds based.
On the
There's
road.
there's a
Look at your
great
boy.
moment late in this match where they're throwing strikes that is like, it's awesome, dude. Like, because Hennig, again, he's being ridiculous, but he's still firing back. That's one thing I will say too. Like, even when the bumping got out of control, the one thing Curt was really good at is he was great at going through the gears when it was time to be a heel. Like when he would take over, while I don't think he's like the most interesting heel worker, he will be very aggressive, right? You see that in this match. When he takes over, he does take over and he earns it and gives Boss Man stuff to sell. So yeah, it's really nice match. Really nice. Not like, again, they're not trying to have a classic or anything, but if you just watch the work in this match, it's very, very sharp. Two guys that I think very much relied on their physical gifts, and those are still intact here, thankfully. So tremendous, tremendous stuff. And up next, we have a very funny one, which I still enjoyed very much. But
fun.
it is,
I like
it is a hilarious match. December 28th, 1990. Roddy Piper is back in the ring. This would become, we're at the Garden for this, it should be said, Intercontinental title. This will become a pretty regular house show pairing. They had like 30 matches over the next 3 months. This is their third of those. And I want to know that, like, it's the Garden. It's airing, but it's a house show, And while the Garden is a special house show, the boys are still having some fun. But my God, Rod Piper sees the way Curt Hennig sells and just decides that he will also do that now. There are some moments here that I'm still recovering from. Honestly, it's this is fascinating. Bobby, what did you make of Mr. Perfect and Roddy Piper?
Yeah, I didn't love it. I kind of thought I'd be alone on that, so I'm glad that I'm not. It was fine. Like the chops at the beginning were very good, and there were some nice moments where I kind of getting the sleeper on. But other than that, like it was kind of just there, especially compared to the 3 matches we watched before this, and definitely the 2 that come after. Like it is what it is, man. Like it's kind of just there. It's not bad. It just there's not a lot to it.
It's a house show match, right?
Yeah.
I think it's someone messaged me about like they did the space the exact same. There's another match that's exactly the same, basically. I will say, and it's always refreshing. You go back and watch these matches, like the way the crowd reacted. Like there's a suplex counter late, right? Like Curt goes for a suplex and Piper snatches a pin. And it's like the place explodes on this near forward, dude. Like those crowds were very, very different. Yeah. But some interesting quirks here as these two styles kind of try to gel. Oracle, what did you think of this?
Well, I mean, post comeback Piper is an interesting fella, in the ring. I mean, he was always an interesting one, but he finds another person to tango with, and they start selling like that. I mean, that's just that you give him an inch, you give him give him a mile, he's gonna start acting like he's fucking Godzilla over there.
Dude, when he takes the exposed buckle and he starts like shaking and shit on the mat because he's seen the way Curt Hennig sells and declares that he should also like.
Well, it's not only that, but like Piper's shine is just ridiculous too. I mean, like,
of course, yeah.
Piper, he's like the same size as Hennig, and he's flinging him around and shit. He like rips up Kurt's singlet at one point. Tries to get him to go nude and like.
What is it with Madison Square Garden and dudes wanting to rip Curt Hennig's clothes off?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. This match is a treat. Honestly, it's just. It's very fun, and it's not. You could probably argue that it's not even a good match, but it's just super fun.
Yeah.
But Piper's sell of the turnbuckle shot, where he's like seizuring. My favorite thing Curt does in this match is when he does that, like, there's like no space either, because like Roddy's standing up against the ropes, and Curt does this insane standing drop kick and just kick him right in the face out of the ring. It was awesome.
Yep.
Yeah, like Kurt's bumping is absurd. Of course, he does the deal where he does it in the Bossman match. It works a little bit better there, but Piper's slinging around his broken singlet, and Curt does his crotches himself on the post.
He loved that one.
Yeah. Oh God, he loved it. That one, and the bounce on the turnbuckle. Let's do a fucking Phoenix splash. but yeah, this was super entertaining. Again, not even really a good match, but like, you get Hennig doing his antics, and then like post comeback Piper like just like being totally ridiculous, and and of course you have the non-finish, which is typical of the time, but yeah, fun.
Piper in his stand-up, shut up and fight me era here. I think it's fair to say. Alex, what did you think of this Piper perfect match?
Yeah, for I think, was he wearing the black on blue or blue on black? This is the one that Perfect has the neon singlet that I always associate with him. That his Hasbro was modeled after, which I did not have a Perfect Hasbro, and I was thinking about it, and I had to go and get it off the shelf. The only Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig figure I have is these modern Superstars. I love these
cool,
figures, dude.
Yeah.
I've started a collection of these, and it comes with the classic IC title and everything. And the singlet is actually fabric, so I think that's cool. I have had sex in my life, rest assured. But anyway, so
rest assured.
I always feel the need to bring that up when I start like analyzing wrestling figures at 36 years old. So, all right, bright singlet. Match aside, boy, there ain't no aesthetic like that MSG walkway when those guys come out of the locker room. Like the tracking shot of Piper, like already in the zone, and then walks through the curtain. And we got Vlad in attendance, who actually bites on the false finish where Piper rolls him up. He gets the schoolboy on him. Vlad comes out of his seat and he thinks it's the end of the match. And I was just like, it worked, Vlad. Direction wise, there's an incredible crossfade. It's just showing the face of the title, and it crossfades into Piper's face, like looking at Perfect. And I don't know, I assume it was the same production crew for these Madison Square Garden shows, because these were the ones that up until like 97 were broadcasted on the Madison Square Garden network.
Yeah.
But there's always a different, like little differences if you watch these matches and these shows from a production standpoint on like television of what the WWF was doing at the time. So I don't, New York's a union state too, so maybe they had fucking some $30 an hour guy on there. Yeah, Kurt's just flying all over the place. There is a point in this where Curt counters a collar and elbow attempt from Piper that I did like pump my fist at, where Piper goes into lead and Curt catches his arm going in and sidesteps it and gets into a go behind waistlock. And then, just again, when we do this, I try to take notes of little things that pop me, and that was one of them. He was assaulted again, and his clothes were ripped off for probably the 7th time in Grin Grappler history. We have a Roddy Piper match with a double clothesline spot.
Actual.
So, yeah, my note, Oracle says Pipe with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre cell. When he goes into the exposed buckle, he sells like Curt in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre when Leatherface hits him in the head, and he's just on the ground like convulsing and shit. And I'm sure Piper would think he was being subtle with this shit. It's ridiculous. I have the drop kick noted as well that we already talked about. When they're on the outside, it's not a disqualification for some reason, but Curt hits Piper with a chair, which Gorilla calls a ram job. He goes, ram job on the outside.
There's a couple interesting lines from the announce team in this one in particular. It's interesting.
So Alfred passed me that gabagool sandwich. A woman, not even a young lady, a woman in the crowd has a sign that says "We're hot for Rod," which there's numerous ways you can read that sentence. But like by the end of this, it feels like a comedy match. It honestly does. Like with just like the histrionics of it all. And we talk about that in the Piper episode. Piper, I think it's fairly known, was when he wanted to be just an one of a kind performer and could come across as one of the all-time badasses in the history of wrestling. But he also could come across as an absolute goof and like tank matches because of it. I don't think this match is like tanked in any ways. It's just like there's just a dynamic there that where Piper was at this point in his career doesn't mesh with this. I think, if we're talking like 85 Piper against 93 Mr. Perfect, that could be some awesome shit right there.
Yeah.
But at this, where they're like intersecting here, is just not where we get the most out of what could have been. It's a Piper match, so of course there's no finish. And then I'm glad Mr. Perfect ducked, because if he hadn't, Piper would have killed him with that belt shot. He like swings it like a baseball bat, and he's not far from him. Like, he basically avoided death with that. And then there is a great belt shot at the end of the match when he hits Perfect with it. And belt shots are few and far between good, and that was a really good one. And I stuck around in the YouTube video for the MSG closing credits, which the entirety of them was Greg Valentine getting hit in the head with a guitar. Like, it was in slow motion, and like this like 90s music's playing, like, and he's just standing there while like the credits go over. An interesting match. The MSG crowd, we've done a good amount of matches from MSG and Grin Grappler, and there's always a special like intangible. And man, do I love going back and watching like these house shows they ran there, that old school section on the WWE Network or Peacock. That's just like an embarrassment of riches to me. You're not going to see like the greatest matches of all time, but there's just like an aesthetic and a feel that you don't really get in other shows. And that's similar here. Crowd, like, the Madison Square Garden crowd never forgot Roddy Piper, even up until, was that 08, 09, when they had the Rumble there, and he got that huge reaction. So an okay match, but just wouldn't be like the top of my rankings of these ones we're doing.
Yeah, I think it's a good example of why. I think of all the wrestlers we've covered, I'm not sure any gets such glowing reviews from his peers as Curt Hennig, right? Like, he is often the guys that wrestle him just loved him. I think you see that here, in the sense that I think in some ways this was more fun for Roddy Piper to wrestle than it was for us to watch.
Yeah.
And, wrestling has changed an awful lot, but as I mentioned it earlier, they genuinely had like 30 matches over the next couple months. And I think you see here the kind of playful nature of Hennig that made him such a fun guy to be paired with on those. Right now, they're not necessarily matches that I think hold up especially gloriously under light like we have here, like when you examine it. But let's be real, bro. I mean, Roddy Piper and Curt Hennig, when they got to the Garden that night, the least of their concerns were, how's this going to hold up in 2024? They were thinking, let's get the Garden rocking, let's get home safe, and let's have some fun.
Let's see if we can get Vlad to bite on a false finish. And if we do that, then we made it.
It's like the physical media reference here, Alex. The Great Dungeon Collection, where Bret Hart selects his matches.
I just watched that last week. It's so good.
Yeah, and the best part of it, honestly, more than the matches, is just him talking about and he says about Hennig, he says if he could go back and wrestle anyone and just experience it again, it would be Curt, because he just said they had so much fun. And he uses that word a lot, fun. And I think that is, when you hear guys in the industry say they think Curt was like one of the best workers ever, for a long time I would kind of go, because I do think that's, a lot personally. But I think that's a big part of it, like he had this kind of fun nature. I know he's got a great reputation as being like one of the great ribbers in wrestling history. I think guys loved working him. And I think that's very present here, even if this is the weakest match that we cover. Also, Lord Alfred Hayes is like kind of a heel here, which is very uncomfortable. When he's like doing the thing of like, Perfect hasn't cheated yet, and it's really weird, dude.
You won't believe what I just saw. Promotional consideration. So with Hennig, though, being a ribber, like, my thing with that is like, his ribs are why Dynamite Kid got his teeth knocked out. And like,
of course, but
like Owen Hart's ribs are funny to me. Like that one where he stole Gangrel's watch and helped him look for it for a year. That shit is fucking hilarious. But Hennig, like, there's that, and then when the NWO had to hide under the ring in WCW, he took a bunch of like X-Lax and just shit everywhere under the ring and was like, ah ha ha ha. Like,
the boys have a different sense of humor, to be fair. That's kind of,
It was a different time.
Well, I wouldn't know about that, but it was the one that Waltman recently tweeted about, where he put like a key, like a lock on Bockwinkel's glasses in between the frame.
Yes, that's Pat Tanaka. I remember corroborated that story, and like the AWA, the big rib at the time was padlocking shit shut, and Vern had to hold a meeting where he was like, "No more of this bullshit," and Vern went to leave the room by picking his suitcase up, and it was padlocked to like something on the floor, like there was like a hook or something, and yeah, but I jest. Perfect, everyone said he had a good sense of humor, and I can imagine in that era of wrestling needing to break up the monotony of just driving and doing the same match every night. So people like him were really important, and like this match, these are important too, because I imagine if you're in the WWF and you see you're working Curt on a show that's not going to be on TV, then you can kind of do whatever the fuck you want and have a good time out there.
Yeah,
What house shows are supposed to be.
Yeah, he's going to take all the bumps for you, right? Let's be real. So,
yeah.
Right, other matches to call out from this first WWF run. Obviously, we've covered the Bret SummerSlam match, right? We did it on the Bret Hart Grin Grappler, which was specifically a SummerSlam edition. What else would you guys like to shout out from this act?
Tito matches, right? 1990.
Yep, those are good. Those are good.
That'll come with the third act. The Saturday Night's Main Event with Hogan. Do you want to talk about perfect, ridiculous style working with somebody? That was Hogan.
Yeah. His bumps in that are just like...
Yeah.
And, there's that version of history where he was supposed to win the Rumble in 1990, and it comes down to him and Hogan, and, he goes flying over the top rope for that. And, there's those three different versions of history that said WrestleMania 6 was going to be Zeus and Hogan, it was going to be Perfect and Hogan, it was going to be Warrior and Hogan. Who fucking knows? But I do know they had that Saturday Night's Main Event match, and it was good. It's actually a fine match too, but aesthetically, I don't know if you'll ever watch a more badass Survivor Series match than the Perfect Team against the Ultimate Warriors. The Ultimate Warrior, Kerry Von Erich, and the fucking Legion of Doom, that's like God tier Survivor Series team right there, man. And then they wrestle Mr. Perfect and all three members of Demolition. Famously, that's Axe's last match in the company, so he doesn't even do his hair for the match. He just comes out looking like a fucking used car salesman. And that match flies by, and it's a lot of fun. And I don't agree with it, but a lot of people point to Curt having Kerry's best matches in the WWF. I don't think those matches were good. I didn't think they had any.
I remember liking one of them. There's some rough ones too.
There's one that gets fairly praised, but I don't think I've ever even seen it.
Yeah,
I know the SummerSlam one is not good, so maybe they had like another TV match or something that I'm blanking on. But
I think so.
Yeah, for what we've covered so far, at least in my opinion, any other matches we would recommend come with that kind of asterisk of like you have to know what you're getting into with this era of Curt Hennig's work.
Right. Yesterday on Worldwide, come on the chat. So yesterday on Worldwide, Ibu mentioned that he likes the Blue Blazer match, which is from an 89 Saturday Night's Main Event, maybe. I forget the years in this era. I'm terrible.
They had a WrestleMania 5 match, right? But there's another one that's like actually like got some meat to it, right?
Yeah, the WrestleMania match is kind of a squash, but yeah, I think they.
Yeah, I'll try and get the date on this while. Oracle, any others, mate?
That's basically it, man. Like the Tito series, the Kerry series is divisive, but we've covered the Bret SummerSlam '91 match, Piper matches. That's really it. I mean, there's really not a lot of meat to it. I think he has a couple other decent boss man matches, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, so I think the real quote unquote Blue Blazer match is the one. It's an MSG Network show in East Rutherford, New Jersey. I think it's the one. They have about 10 minutes. There's a couple of others. There's one in Milan that got 15, which is fascinating. Which airs there. So these are all 89.
That might be the show where Bret wrestled Andre in a singles match. That's on that Dungeon show, or that Dungeon Collection. Excuse me.
It is indeed. It is indeed headlined by Demolition versus Powers of Pain.
Fuck yes. I know we're not talking about Bret, but you should check out that match because it's like an example of what Bret was good at. Because Andre does nothing and Bret makes him look amazing.
Yes, Coco Beware versus the Big Boss Man. Had him rocking that night, brother. All right.
Hell yeah.
Let's move on to our third and final act. And I'm so thrilled that we got to do this match. This
Born
is a total
again.
hidden gem. Total hidden gem. But first, I guess I should paint the picture slightly. So after the SummerSlam 91 match we just mentioned with Bret, Hennig's out the ring for over a year. He's still around. He manages, quote unquote, Ric Flair. There's an interview of him in 2002 where he says, and I quote, "I led Ric Flair to the World Wrestling Federation title," which is the correct way to describe your success as a manager. And
what happened to the Cardis, man?
I know
we need real workers again. Yeah,
absolutely. And the angle that Alex mentioned, where because of a certain warrior not being able to make the town, they had to do some crazy last-minute business in which Savage convinced Perfect to be on his team, and it was a whole ordeal, and it's very well done. The match itself is good, not great, a little bit awkward, but it's good. My God. And here we are 6 months later. Famously, Curt run Ric Flair out of town in the first kind of notable Raw match. And here we are in the road to the King of the Ring. Now, this is to get into the King of the Ring tournament. These two had 2 time limit draws on Superstars, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
And this is finishing that story, quote unquote. And they have some time, man. They have like 15 minutes. And this thing is a total hidden gem and is quietly one of the more compelling Raw matches from the early days. Partly because it is absolutely the furthest thing from a Raw match or a 1993 WWF match you can imagine. And it's fascinating. Oracle, tell the people about it.
Well, let me tell you what. Matt Bourne is a very good wrestler. He's excellent in Portland. That's where he made his name, Portland, and then later on the Rat Pack in Mid-South.
Mid-South, yep.
He was obviously very good as Doink. I think at some point in this bout, these gentlemen maybe got a little bit upset with one another, and they began working rings, which is Kira Maeda's promotion in Japan, the shoot stop promotion there. At one point, well, I mean, it's just they're doing all kinds of awesome stuff. Like early on, they do this like slap exchange. They're just like peppering each other in the face as hard as they can. The holds and stuff they start doing, like they get onto the floor and Curt gets mad and just does like a double leg.
Yep.
And Doink tries to block it, but just like falls on his ass. They do a spot where like, because Doink starts working. They're doing limb work here, so Doink's working on.
It is the Grin Grappler after all.
Right. There you go. Doink starts working on Curt's arm, and at one point, like Curt's like uncooperative with an arm bar, so he starts like fighting it off, and like it literally looks like an exchange you would see in like rings from like 1994. So like
I have Bloodsport in all caps in my notes at one point.
They just and then at one point they get back up and start slapping each other in the face again. I don't know. It's awesome. Like this match is like it's gritty. They're beating the hell out of each other. It's like shocking because meanwhile you got Vince and Savage and Heenan like just doing commentary like it's regular Monday night. It's
uncensored, uncooked.
It's surreal though because they're doing this whole set piece about Doink is going to do a switch, which is the finish. So like the match is framed with like, is this the real Doink the Clown? And they spend the entire match like debating this. Meanwhile, the fellas are just like grappling in the Manhattan Center.
Yeah, they're in there having like a fucking quasi shoot style match, and they're like trying to talk about WWF gimmickry.
It's fascinating, and it's the closest we get back to the AWA Curt, right? Because he's really fiery and kind of tough here.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Like this kicks ass.
It really, really does.
And of course, the finish, you get like the classic Doink. Try to the second Doink gets in and. Bornhein's out in the ring, and Hennig still hits the perfect plex on the new Doink and wins, and the ref just waves it off and goes, too bad, you lost. And And Hennig advances. But yeah, this is what an ass beater of a match, man. They just it's like it's well worked in general, but then when they get like uncooperative and like it fucking
Real
rules and
grabs.
like, yeah.
I always love when Curt does the catch perfect plex, when the guy like goes to and he hooks him.
Yeah.
It isn't quite as smooth as it is other times, but I always loved that as a finish. It looks great. I should note, by the way, this is the May 24th Raw. It was taped on the 17th, May 24th Raw, for anyone who wants to check this out. It's because it is almost never brought up. But I'm glad we got to cover it, especially because the Flair match is good, but like,
I seem to like that more than y'all do.
Yeah, I can never. It's one of those matches I would like to enjoy more than I do. Because I like the idea of it. I even like their. I mentioned to you guys the Coliseum video match from the end of '92. I actually prefer in a weird because I think they kind of lose their way a little bit on the Raw match. But you mentioned it, Bob, right? That one's famous of them because it's the first Raw match of any.
Yeah, it's the third or fourth episode. Yeah.
Yeah. But it is very fondly remembered, Alex. So you're not in the, I think we're probably the minor. The rest of us are the outlier there, I'd imagine. But nonetheless, Alex, this is the first time you've seen this Doink match, and regardless, what did you think of it?
I had never seen this. So first of all, I quickly figured out what you meant by May 15th, 14th, but I put on the May 14th episode of Raw, and just because this is 45 minutes, so I just watched that through. That's a very significant episode of Raw. That's where Marty and Sean have the match, and that's where 1-2-3 Kid beats Razor Ramon. But that one starts with the last week, and in the vein of what Bob had mentioned, like something you need to see on Raw. It was the first time they shot like a big angle outside, and that's where Mr. Perfect jumped Sean outside, and
the crazy brawl,
they brawl like by the fans waiting to get in, and because it's Manhattan Center, New York fans, so they're just going fucking nuts, and it's an awesome segment. Perfect is in tracksuit, looking majestic, and Sean, looking resplendent, is wearing the 1991 house show tour T-shirt tucked into black jeans, tucked into cowboy boots, and there's a car out there that they brawl onto, and Perfect hip tosses Sean onto, which breaks the windshield. And because ribs are funny, that was Howard Finkel's rental car, and they didn't tell him they were doing that with it. Poor Fink, man.
Always,
but anyway,
Fink, always.
Disgraced former chairman of WWE was a very good straight man commentator. Two things can be true: he can be a horrendous piece of shit and also be like a great nerd on commentary. And on that Raw, the Smoking Guns come out, and their music starts with guns going off, and he goes, "Oh, what's that?" And then Heenan goes, "Get down!" So I watched the entirety of that Raw to feed into this, because they announced at the end of that Raw, next week King of Ring qualifier Doink versus Mr. Perfect, and not to the extent of revelation of AWA Curt Hennig, like something I've discovered in my adult years of fandom that've been like, whoa. But I think people are have come around it. Heel Doink was fucking money, man. That was a character they could have gotten a lot more out of. And now I know Matt Bourne was a bit of an unpredictable son of a bitch, but like him in that role, like when he comes at the theme song and when he walks out here and just like the contempt he has for people, it's like, oh, it's so good. But yeah, this match starts with, I think the miscommunication starts from the very beginning, because it's like, Doink's going to blindside him, but he kind of misses, and him and Curt are kind of fumbling around with the towel for a little bit and whatnot. And then there's a part where Mr. Perfect Irish whips him into the corner, and then Doink just boots the fuck out of Curt in the chest, just kicks him, like sends him backwards. It's ridiculous. And then there's on the apron, there's kind of a couple stiff boys, a punch, and then Matt Bourne channels Championship Carnival and runs at him with a forearm. And there's this sweet wrestling exchange when they get in the ring where Doink fireman carries him, and like on the way down, Curt sets him into a head scissors. And so like there's these moments of like chaos, confusion, and then they'll sync up and do like these sweet wrestling exchanges. Like I can't think of matches off the top of my head to compare this to. And again, it's just a random match with Doink and Mr. Perfect on Monday Night Raw in 1993. But I was watching this like, what the fuck is this? Then they go to like Hennig gets towards the apron, and Doink does the thing where he springs off the bottom rope and comes down and stomps Curt in the face, and he stomps him. And Curt goes, fuck! Like he just like looks to the side and yells. And then that's when the blood sport exchange starts, where Doink goes for a Fujiwara armbar, and then Curt tries to like roll over and ride him like amateur wrestling style, and Doink's just not letting go of it. You know, we're at UFC 2 here with these guys, and we go to the outside, and Doink boots him in the head twice. The second one really hard, and then Curt goes shit, and that's when he turns around and double legs him. And then there seems to be a bit of a conversation at this point. We get back on the rails. The Doinks pull the twin magic gimmick, and but it backfires on him, a la Nikki Bella and Paige at Money in the Bank 2015. Yeah. Of course, this referee sticks with his decision in this case, but yeah, I know exactly what you mean. The perfect plex that he would kind of almost like slide into, like you get into position and then like snap the guy over, and then Curt wins this. He qualifies for what will eventually become our next match, and yeah, a fascinating match. There aren't many you can really compare it to, and what makes it even more like interesting and kind of baffling to watch is the commentaries paying no mind to like what's actually happening in the ring. You know, like in matches that kind of broke down, Jim Ross would be like, these two men jockeying for position, a bit of a one-upsmanship in the ring there. And, you know, Vince is just selling whatever else is going on in the show, and Heenan's getting his lines in. And so it's an overall experience that I definitely recommend checking out. It's the one that I come away from this, like, what the fuck? Holy shit, this is awesome.
Yes, it is. I think, again, folks, I'd imagine a lot of you watching this haven't seen this match, and change that, even if just for the quirks that come from the certain clashes that emerge as we've described throughout. It's very, very interesting. Bobby, I assume you had seen this because you're doing like a 90, or you were doing a 93 watch along.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, and when I saw it, I probably saw it for the first time like last summer at this point, and it's like, well, you know, that rules. It's not like anything we're seeing. But then seeing it again today with the context of, you know, seeing his AWA stuff really made me appreciate it even more, because, you know, that's not really how he was working in WWF. And, you know, bringing Doink into this actually is cool, too, because he's the guy that appears in a lot of the best stuff in 1993 as well. And people don't really realize, you know, you guys realize it, but people don't really realize that he could go. It's mostly just a gimmick that they remember. And, yeah, it was a great time, man. And their superstar matches are good. They're not as good as this one, but, yeah.
Yeah, they definitely had a weird chemistry that had these sort of rugged, rough edges. Very, very interesting to watch them. Joe in the chat is right. Born selling with the leg is very strong. He's a very good pro wrestler, man. I mean, that was consistent.
His Portland stuff is fucking awesome, dude. He's great in Portland.
Very, very. What was the WCW? Big Josh was the gimmick in WCW, right?
Yeah, where he and Arn had a 45-minute, 2 out of 3 falls match.
That one is long, dude. I
think I've told this before on here, but there's a great story of during the WCW Smarks Choice Pool that summer. I stayed down in South Carolina when Dylan was still down there, and he and I were watching all these matches and stuff. And of course, he had his laptop, and he was like, "Oh man, Arn versus Big Josh. You know, Matt Bourne. Oh, I gotta check this out." And we were supposed to go out to eat somewhere. And like his ex was getting so mad because he was like, "I got you." He's like, "I gotta," you know. He's like, "Hold on,
so long.
I don't know when this match is ending." You know,
it's from the stretch where they're doing the 2 out of 3 falls deal. That's when it's from, right? When like every main event of Saturday night is 2 out of 3 falls.
Yeah, like May.
I love me Swan Anderson. I remember seeing how long it was and popping huge for the idea, but it is That one's
The
pretty.
funny
That's
thing is, it's like a 3-star match. It's not even.
yeah,
like,
exactly. It's like mechanically good, but it's so unnecessarily long. It's such a slog, dude. I remember watching it in awe. Yeah, fascinating time that was. That was the Kip Allen Fry era, right?
Mm-hmm. Right before he left.
Yep.
And the old cowboy came in.
He sure did. It's another story for another day. All right, there it is, folks. Doink the Clown, Mr. Perfect. Check it out. May 24th episode of Raw 93, that is. And then we jump to our final match just 3 weeks later.
If I may,
yes,
quickly.
mate. Go for it.
In preparation for this, I, of course, consulted physical media. And upon opening this DVD today to review its contents to see if any of the matches we were doing were on it, they're not. Match collection is so it does have the entirety of the Bach 60-minute.
That's cool.
But anyway, the little pamphlet in it that goes over it, I opened this and I saw this. That is Mr. Perfect giving Bam Bam Bigelow a perfect plex.
My.
Oh, shit.
And as you can imagine, I immediately said, what, when, how?
Right.
And I spent about an hour researching this today because you had to get really specific with Google search criteria. Because basically just Googling Mr. Perfect Bam Bam Bigelow, the only thing that came up was a Scott Keith blog entry that he did like a Q&A where someone said they had this DVD and saw this picture and wanted to know when the match happened. And he said he didn't know. And so I had to dive pretty deep into it, but I was able to come across that they were in the ring with each other twice because it would have been right around this point in time is what I thought. It would have been 93 at some point.
Yeah.
So the first time was on August 20th of 93. So it's kind of in the wake of this show. At Madison Square Garden, or excuse me, this was at the Cow Palace. The main event of the show was Marty Jannetty, Mr. Perfect, and Tatanka against Bam Bam Bigelow, Diesel, and Shawn Michaels in an elimination 6-man tag. But then I was able to find that a week later, they did have a singles match at the Nassau Coliseum. Bam Bam Bigelow defeated Mr. Perfect by disqualification in 14 minutes. So it's just kind of one of those things. Oh, Jesus, the match that followed that was Randy Savage and The Undertaker against Giant Gonzalez and Adam Bomb.
Wow.
So anyway, that seemed intentional, that whoever designed like the art for that DVD release was like, let's put this picture in here to fuck with the hardcore fans because they'll never be able to see this match. But you guys know what I mean. That caught my eye of like, what the fuck? And so,
there's one quirky one that you can see. I think is still out there because some of the Coliseum videos didn't get uploaded to the network and a lot of that stuff's lost. But him and Yoko have a Coliseum video match in 93. And that was one when I discovered that. Yeah, I was like,
oh, wow.
That's a weird match, right? I'm almost certain it's still out there. I'll try and find the date on that in a moment when we get to the other shout outs and such. But
sorry to derail it, but I know this last match is kind of the main event for all of us, so I wanted to get that story out. And it kind of ties into it because Bammers is involved in the show as well.
Yeah, it's a very special one. June 13th, 1993, King of the Ring, the semi-final. And we're back to, I think, the most famous foe for Curt, right, in Bret. And they have these two famous WWF matches that are two of the more significant matches of the decade for WWF. To say I prefer this one would be an understatement. I think this match is on a different level, personally. Right. I know that's probably controversial in some circles, but I think, Alex, we've talked about this before, right? I think this match is like peak professional wrestling. Pre-match promo where Gene is getting them all worked up, which is kind of like them playing a cover of the Piper Bret segment in a lot of ways, right? From WrestleMania, they're very similar.
But that works too, so why not just do it again?
Yeah, absolutely. It works a treat. And a key here to me is we still have Heenan and Savage, but we have Jim Ross. And this match, it awakens the sleeping giant within JR. Mm-hmm. He's so excited to call this match. You can tell, right? And this is one of Savage's best commentary calls, honestly. And that isn't a long list, to be fair. But what does he say? He goes, "This is a classy match." That's the way he describes it, and it's like, fucking right it is, Randy. Talk to him. This has such a prestige, and it reminds me, and I mentioned this earlier about Act 1. It shows you how presentation can change things in that because this is a tournament and it's a babyface match, this has a totally straight-laced sports competition, athletic. That's the feel for this match.
Mm-hmm.
And God, there's not two wrestlers in the WWF at this time that suit that more, right? I mean, they are just totally at home here. And it's a babyface match where Hennig leans heel, and there's so many great wrinkles. We're going to talk about them all here. I absolutely adore this match. King of the Ring 93, Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect. Bobby, what'd you think of it?
Yeah, it was tremendous. I like this whole show quite a bit. The 3 Bret matches and Hogan Yokozuna are all a lot of fun. But this one in particular, man, it does stand out. Like, and the elements of Bret Piper match are there too, because Perfect kind of slowly starts leaning heel a little bit more, and it just, and man, they get each other, and like the wrestling soulmates thing, we talk about that quite a bit on here, and that's what these two are. And Bret hurt his hand earlier in the night, so true Grin Grappler fashion, Mr. Perfect capitalizes on that, does some handwork, and then after Bret hits the railing on the outside and they get back in, you kind of see Perfect seeing, kind of sensing that, like, he's got an opening here, turns up the intensity, kind of turns up the pace, and just tremendous stuff, man. Just a hell of a match.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Tape Machines talks about a lot. Our friend Tape, he always talks about like the headlock takeovers in these matches. There's like, it's one of those things you can't describe, right? But you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. You saw what the lad's reaction was to that. Like, it's the best the headlock takeover has ever looked, and they do it consistently. In 98, it isn't the same, but you can still see it if you squint. It's a chemistry thing, man. They had a magic together. It's a beautiful thing. Oracle, I'm sure you co-sign all the praise thus far, but I'm intrigued. What did you make of this match?
I've always liked this match, and there was a time, I think even you and I didn't really bicker, but I was like, I don't know, man, I really like the SummerSlam 91 match, but tell you what, brother, this is probably, like, we talked about this in the chat today, but I think this is the best match of 1993 WWF.
Yes.
This match fucking great. I mean, like, I know I could say I'm not a star rating guy, but then I always throw them out because I always try to get a template for it. This is like a 4-star match, man. This is like,
it's great.
I mean, this shit fucking rules. Like, I don't know, man. Just JR calling it that sports presentation that you almost never get in WWF. It was always, any sports build or sports presentation was always, always involved Bret, during this period.
So,
and like, JR getting to call this, my God, was he great in this? I mean, just incredible.
Totally at home here. Totally at home.
Man, like the spot where of course, I'm already jumping to the end of the match, but when Hennig blocks the sharpshooter by pulling Bret's, what an incredible, that's the type of stuff that's like, get up and start pumping your fist, because that's real graps right there. In the spot where Bret, does his classic, like, turnbuckle, get knocked off the apron into the whatever, he lands on all kinds of shit.
It's horrible.
He talks about in his DVD that, like, he didn't know that little crate was there or whatever, and almost like legit blew his knee out.
Yeah, like what the hell? That had to have hurt. God, that looked bad. But so much awesome stuff in this, like the suplex to the floor right before the finish. Oh, like it's like it builds and builds and builds, and like the finish is a little bit out of nowhere. That's kind of like the sort of art of Bret too, like let's the flash pin is kind of is kind of a thing, but what an absolute fucking barn burner, man. Like, this whole show's great. Like, that Hogan Yoko match was praised years ago on the boards, and like,
it's a hoot, dude.
That match fucking ruled. JR, like, this is the first show where he like really gets to like
be JR.
It's by far the best WWF pay-per-view in '93. I don't think there's.
You could legitimately argue it's the last time Hogan tried to make someone look good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That'd be an interesting conversation.
Brother.
Just a classic. This match was a classic, man. Like, holy shit, this match was good.
Yeah, it's.
I've always liked it, but like just watching it was just like, I was like, holy fuck.
It gets better every time.
Yeah, and it's one that actually like looks even better when you look at it through an analytical lens. Like, and that's. I think we've seen that isn't always the case with perfect WWF stuff, especially. Man, they have that very particular pace and cadence that's like, it's kind of Steamboat Flair-esque, where it's like that kind of seesaw thing, you know, where it's like slow, and then they have these explosions of pace where they hit the ropes hard and do something. It's just, God, it's intoxicating, dude. Like they're so good at that. How great is it early when there's a clean break, and then the next time there's a clean break, it's clean, but as soon as they break, Hennig fires with a chop. Like, it's like you get a great flavor for the match with that. And Jim Ross, nothing he loves more than a corner knife edge chop. He explodes with his chair. He's like, he's back. My God, what a match, Alex. Talk to us.
Well, I fired it up on Peacock, and before I could start the fast forwarding feature, I forgot, that this show starts with Vince McMahon saying we're in the heartland of America. They're in fucking Dayton, Ohio. You want to talk about? No offense to anyone from Dayton listening, but I've spent enough time there to decree that it's a toilet. So
look, bro, that's a big Sapolsky town, brother. There's a lot of, you know.
It was a big wrestling town because there's fucking nothing else to do there. So the promo beforehand is awesome with Gene riling him up. I did after this watch the uncensored '98 match, and on commentary, Heenan kind of harkens back to this, talking about Stu Hart and Larry Hennig's feud, and he says, "You know what Curt told me before this match? He told me that if his dad had beaten Stu Hart one more time, he was going to get to keep him." And that's such a stupid, like, you know, drunk WCW Heenan line, but I fucking lost it, dude. But yeah, Gene's just riling him up. It goes back and forth, and I think they're getting closer to doing this again. But the part where Bret goes off because his music plays, and Hennig sticks the landing on his promo, looking right into the camera, and say, like, that old thing they used to do of guys backstage cutting a promo while the opponent's music was playing on their way to the ring. That's like, that's you know, boxing forever when they show the other guy back in the dressing room while the other guy's coming out to the ring, like sports presentation, as you guys so adequately put it. I remembered as I started this was like one of the first matches I downloaded off Kazaa when I got high-speed internet. I had just this awful rip of this match that I watched, 10 times. That it was an AVI file that was probably like this big on the screen. When you blew it up, it looked like shit. So, so a little bit of warm and fuzzies attached to this match in that respect. Very cinematic framing of this shot where Hennig comes through the curtain. Bret is talking shit facing the entranceway, and Hennig comes out, and the screen behind him is a shot of Bret like face on. So you see Bret over Hennig's shoulder, like with Bret waiting for him in the ring. It's very brief. They do a lot better job of it for the Hogan match in this. When Hogan comes out and they show Yokozuna just waiting for him in the ring, it's fucking awesome, but very cinematic in a simple aspect. The beginning's just wrestling. We talked about the way both of them feed, and then like neither of them take it easy on each other. When they go in and both of them do the push off with the boots, both of them go flying with it. And they both have the long hair, and it just looks fucking fantastic. There's Perfect has that awesome drop kick. The placement of it looks so sick though, because he drop kicks Bret, and Bret falls down kind of like halfway on the bottom rope, so it bounces him back into the ring, and it just looks awesome. And the crowd eventually, this in its own way kind of becomes the Piper match from WrestleMania 8, because close to the end with the antics, like the cheating that Perfect's doing, there's like the guys in the crowd are kind of getting behind Perfect to win this, like, and the kids and, the rest of the audience is with Bret. But it's just a really interesting thing to watch how the crowd evolves with the match and decides who they want to win it. We talked about the slingshot where Bret eats shit. Perfect does a missile drop kick, which is not something he did regularly, and it shows because he comes flying off the top rope like a bag of concrete, pretty much. But he does have the wherewithal to hook the leg, and he looks into the camera because he thinks that's it. And which little things, man. We get a classic Bret sternum bump into the corner. Dude, when Bret starts working his comeback, just takes Curt's head off with a European uppercut, man.
Mhm.
And that's when Savage, what a lifter, on commentary, he says. And by the end of this, it starts getting back to Curt doing some of that silly shit, but it works within the confines of the match because his attitude is way different.
Yes.
I don't know if this makes sense, but like when he's big chicken shit heel doing that goofy selling and stuff, it becomes comedy. When, this match, he's a good guy and he'll get leveled with something and it'll turn him inside out and he gets mad about it. That makes it completely changes like the shade of it, the dynamic of it. And the suplex to the outside, which is still one of those spots that's so like unpredictable that you really do not see it that often, even in today's wrestling. A Canadian destroyer has replaced an arm drag, but still people don't do that shit that much. And then the ending is awesome. It's just Bret outsmarts him and catches him, and it works really within the confines of this was the semifinals of the tournament. So, Bret's trying to find the quickest way out that he can. Same with Curt. That's why he goes for a small package. And then the post-match is fucking awesome because it's fucking real. And, there's countless examples. When I was watching this, for some reason, I went to a UFC fight in Austin years and years ago. It was before Charlie Dubronx was a big star, and he fought a guy named Efren Escudero, and Efren left this kind of this little opening, and he knew immediately he fucked up, and then Dubronx got his back and choked him out, and then I remember because I was there and I was just kind of watching him, and he was he started laughing to himself and shaking his head, and he was pissed that he lost and he fucked it up, but he still went and shook Dubronx's hand of it's that thing of the frustration of you leave an opening and the other guy capitalizes on it, which happens in all sports, but in the confines of combat sports, you can find a lot of examples of that in high level fights where guys are just mad at themselves afterwards because it's well, fuck. But he still showed the proper respect of giving him a handshake. And it's especially for 1993, so un-WWE like. And I think we talked about the same thing with Piper and Bret when we did that episode. It's just, you can see as time goes on why Bret was such a revelation in that company, the type of matches that he had and that were so unlike other things that were going on in it. But anyway, I'm long-winded about this because I remember when we did the SummerSlam 91 match, my basic review was it's okay. So I want to pay this match the proper respect it deserves because I think this is just top-notch, maybe Perfect's best WWF match.
I think it's not only his best WWF match, I actually think this is the performance of his career. And I say that with absolute love and affection for what he did before. The reason I say that is we all are very aware that physically, he's worn here, right? He's not the same guy. There is such desperation to him in this match. And he truly feels like, as you kind of painted the picture there, Alex, he really does feel like someone that is just really needs this win. And he doesn't get it, right? It's like the most human he ever felt in WWF. And I think to be able to feel that way in this setting, I think it's the performance of his career. I think in many ways this match is more about him than Bret. And I say that as a huge Bret Hart fan. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that's what all of that also is what I described, that thing of him being mad that he lost, but also wanting to pay respect because the guy beat him fair and square. That sounds so much easier to pull off than it actually is in an acting environment, because those are emotions you have to really experience to be believable. And that's why the second act of this dude's career that we covered here is not my type of wrestling, but god damn, this guy was good. Like, and this match is just, if anyone's listening to this and you haven't seen it, Bobby hit the nail on the head. Best show WWF did in '93. Watch the whole show, but this match in particular deserves all your attention.
Yeah, and there's a lot of
Put
nuance.
your phone down for this one.
Yeah,
indeed. There's a lot of nuance to Curt here too, right? Like the way that he wrestles, like he shows some of his heel instincts because he wants to win so bad, but he never goes so far to betray the audience's trust. Like it's just, this is a masterpiece, man. And Bret was such a genius at these kind of, God forbid I use the phrase, but like, you know, the shades of grey within the ring, where it's like that kind of, the Piper match is the most obvious example, as we covered. It's just, yeah, it's a beautiful match, and it's very much one that like encapsulates a lot of the things that I love about wrestling beyond just this match. So it's a classic for sure, and a very positive note to end our match review section on. Before we get to what followed this match and this moment, I want to give you guys a chance to, as always, any matches to call out from not only this act, but also just the rest of Curt's career. There's any other match recommendations, we'll do them now, and then I'll kind of paint the picture of the following few years of Curt's career. Oracle, I'll start with you. Any recommendations from 93 WWF, the WCW comeback?
Well, there was a match I watched in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Nitro I just watched from October 6, 1997. That involves someone we nicknamed Benny. It's quite good.
A very good match. Yeah.
That Nitro is great. In fact, it ends with Flair coming back from the cage door slam, and he cuts an unbelievable Scorched Earth promo to close that show. One of the great Nitro moments, actually. It's the first show ever, or it's the first Nitro ever in the Target Center, Minneapolis. Great Nitro.
Were you living up there at that point?
No. So the Minnesota thing is my dad's side of the family's from there.
Okay.
And I've actually never been. I'm the only one of the four brothers who's never actually been, because my grandfather owned cabins up there, and they would do like summer trips, and like when like the grandkids would get of age, we'd go up there. I never he like passed away like before I was able to get up and go.
So your bartering deal was take me to a Nitro.
But no, I was in Charleston, South Carolina at the time. But,
okay.
My uncle lived up in Minneapolis in the late 80s, early 90s. Went back up there and lived up there, but this was after he had lived there for a while. But there's also a match with the Giant from a few weeks before this that's actually quite fun, where fucking Big Show takes like an insane bump over the ropes, and then like Perfect hits him with the Perfect Plex.
Of course, yeah.
Which is awesome. There's some West Texas Rednecks tags, again, that are good. They also involve one fella by the name known as Benny. But they are quite good. And again, I'm not certain Kurt's in he's not in all those, because there's like four guys in West Texas Rednecks. There's Bobby Douglas Jr., Kendall, and Barry Windham.
Barry is really fun in that. Barry, he actually
Kendall Windham's a good worker.
Yeah,
Kendall was good.
Virgil was in the West Texas.
Yes, he was.
Too.
Yes, he was. Yep.
R.I.P.
In fact, there's a Thunder tag with Curly Bill and is it Curly Bill? I can't remember who he's tagged with, but it's quite good. It's right before. No, I mean, like it's like it's an absolute hidden gem worth seeking out. I can't remember who's. It's like the Thunder before Halloween Havoc '99.
Okay.
Yeah, it's I mean, honestly, a lot of them involve a fella named Benny.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I
don't know if I've ever seen the Uncensored '98 match. I know it's on Kurt's DVD. It's kind of just whatever.
it's extremely whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The build to have it 97 that I'm watching was great, but I know the Flair matches aren't very good. 97. He just, I don't know, he was just worn down.
Yeah, he never adjusted to being an old man wrestler. Unfortunately, once he was without his physical gifts, he just wasn't. He couldn't. He was trying to wrestle like Mr. Perfect for the rest of his career. It was it's a shame. But
point out one bump that he takes in the aforementioned Target Center match. One point, Benny trips him up, and he does like his cartwheel over the head bump, and he lands headfirst onto the steel steps because he gets attacked in the aisleway, and it's insane.
Yeah, it's a very good match. It's like 5 minutes too. It's an absolute shootout.
Good.
It's very good. Very good. I knew it was going to happen because it is the only match you can cite, really. It is what it is, man.
Is that the one you were going to name drop, Alex?
No. So I'm going through my notes here, and I forgot to mention at the end of the second act to circle back to the Japan thing that I called out, the Wrestling Summit from 1990, which, Joe, we might have to figure out a grin along to do for that show. That's the Savage Tenryu, Hogan Hansen.
One of the most fascinating shows ever. Yeah, we should try and do that. You're right.
So one of the matches on that is Rick Martel and Mr. Perfect, which I guess they just teamed them together because they worked there, when they were AWA guys, against Haku and Jumbo Tsuruta. And there's literally a point in that where Haku and Jumbo hit Curt with a double clothesline, and Curt does like his fucking like gainer cell out of it. He goes flying and flips, and you can hear the crowd go, ugh. Like that Japanese crowd just had no time for that, like over the top, like wrestling's fake selling. But
it
then
used
Hogan,
to be like really different, dude. Like wrestling in Japan used to be an entirely different one. Now it's, as Oracle always talks about, the styles are so homogenized. It's like guys can just go over there and wrestle the way they wrestle now. It's not any different.
Exactly, and that's what we've talked about time and time again on here, like the whole allure of Vader in Japan, and I can't do a job over here. I won't get paid as much in Japan. And that show, there's guys on that show. Hogan and Savage both completely like mix it up because they know they have to do different shit over there for the crowd to fight. But anyway, all right. So third act, I will continue my campaign that the Royal Rumble 1993 match is a very underrated Royal Rumble match. And Mr. Perfect is a big part of that. He has like he's the guy that comes out and throws Flair out after Bobby Backlund and Flair start it, and like does a really good job of like avoiding elimination. He's like one of the more compelling figures of that Rumble match.
Tenryu's in that Rumble too, right?
Tenryu's in 93 and 94.
But 93 is the one it would have to be when him and Flair like
start
duking it. Which is an insane place for them to wrestle.
When he's like a paid like member of a $1 million corporation.
Him and Kabuki take out Lex backstage. That's
that's very different.
93, like if you're in the reach of my voice and all you know is that Yokozuna wins because Savage is an idiot and tries to pin him. Yes, that's a very dumb ending, but that match as a whole is very underrated, and Perfect's a big part of that. So I recommend that. The Survivor Series tag from 92 that we mentioned isn't that good. It's very the angle. The angle that led into it was way more powerful than the match. The match just screams of that doesn't work for me, brother. But it wasn't the last time Savage and Perfect teamed. On the Randy Savage unreleased DVD set, we have Mr. Perfect and Randy Savage against Mr. Hughes and Giant Gonzalez, a main event anywhere in the country. Which would have had to have been close to George Gonzalez, one of his last matches in the company. All right. Perfect comment right there from Don't Have an Ant. Yes, the SummerSlam 93 match sucks. But on, I believe it's the Shawn Michaels unreleased set, they have a house show match. It's the one in which they do like a dusty finish where Perfect wins the Intercontinental title, but they don't like tell the crowd that. They just reverse it before Raw the next week or whatever. That match is good, but like all the other shit they did together was so like canceling each other out in terms of like bombacity, and then there's also some weird autopilot shit they do. And then I'm trying to think if I have anything else. So from WCW, the match I was going to call out that was the closest thing I could find to like a good match. He wrestles DDP at Starrcade 97 for the U.S. title. And they have to work hard to get the crowd to care. But by the end, they do. And it has a clean finish, which, as if you've ever watched 97 WCW, you know is very, very rare. The uncensored 98 match is, we've talked about it before. Everyone has talked about it. We don't need to go on. Bret, it just seemed there wasn't much life in him, and then Perfect couldn't do what he was able to do several years prior with him. Bash at the Beach 98, Hennig wrestles Goldberg. Y'all know I love Goldberg, so I'll give that match a thumbs up. But yeah, a lot of it was not good. And so maybe y'all can educate me at this point. What was the deal? He had to start wrestling again, right? Because his Lloyd's of London shit ended,
I believe so. So I'll try and give a timeline on this. October 93 is when his run ends, right?
Mm-hmm.
WrestleMania 10 is March 94.
Special ref.
Yep.
And he does the special guest referee thing with Lex. That goes nowhere, correct? I was trying to... There's no follow-up on that at all. So, I don't know what... In 95, I guess he's on commentary again.
Yeah, is it Survivor Series 95 is on commentary?
Right,
yes,
I think
he comes back for that. Yep.
Yeah.
Very
and then in
show.
96, he does the Triple
H
thing. Yeah. Now, the part that's really interesting that I only found out recently, in 1994, he was penciled in as one of the opponents for Hogan's first match in WCW, which is insane. In 1994, the original plan for Hogan's first match in WCW, according to the Wrestling Observer newsletter, was Hulk Hogan and Ric Flair versus Rick Rude and Curt Hennig.
The fuck?
Yes. And
man, I'm mad I didn't get to, I'm mad it didn't happen,
Well, this is the thing that makes the WCW Hennig run all the more like kind of sad is they were always linked to each other. Like in 91, there was a rumor that Hennig was going to jump. Of course, it didn't happen. 94, that happens. And unfortunately, by the time he gets there, and this is where like history ages something. Alex talked about this earlier. I'm glad you said it because you kind of fell on the sword for me. Like the reality is, unfortunately, WCW crowd did not actually see Curt as a big deal at that point. And the Horseman thing like gets him some heat, but like if you watch the uncensored match, one of the issues with that match is the audience does not see Curt as a big deal. They don't realize that's like a...
Okay, so I'm sorry to interrupt you, Joe, but
No, go for it.
I could begin because I want to add to what you're saying because I've been really deep diving into this 97 Monday Night War watch and
go for it.
When he shows up on that June 30th Nitro, Vegas, everybody's just like
yeah.
They don't care. They don't want to see Curt Hennig.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
They don't like, they have no interest in seeing him at all. Like, and he does get good heat when he turns on the Horseman, joins NWO, and like the build to the Flair match at Havoc 97 is very good. The Turner Brass, man, like that match, I actually think there's a world in 1997 even where Curt and Rick could have had a really good bloodbath.
I agree.
That went to like, no finish at Halloween Heaven 97. And then they end the feud in another bloody match in a no DQ. Remember they had the no DQ at World War III?
Yeah.
No.
Wasn't to be.
It wasn't, sadly. But they didn't give a shit about him when he came in, man. Like,
no.
I mean, I'm sure like back then, like, who's DDP's partner going to be? Like, I'm sure the rumors were crazy because that was like RSPW, all the the internet was because I know for a fact because my brother was an internet fan at the time and like people were probably buzzing about that and then it's like Curt Hennig.
Yeah, it's a shame. It's always interesting the way different parts of history. Like he's aged people love Curt now, and I think there's such fond memories. I think people do forget like he was not really a big deal at that point. Which is is what it is, right?
To his credit, and one of the things I did want to call out when he was on commentary, we talked about this before. This is something we talked about. Samoa Joe was good at when he was on commentary. He wasn't that good on commentary, but he did still exude the energy of he would say I'm better than these guys, and you believe him because he was like a former wrestler. Famously, there's an awesome face-off that happened on I think a Superstars where this was on the ascent of Steve Austin, and he came to do commentary with Vince and Hennig, and Hennig and him started mouthing off, and Austin got up to try to intimidate him, and Perfect got up and got in his face and was like, I've seen 1,000 guys like you before. What are you going to do to me? And Austin's just like, you sit down, you piece of trash. And they're like just going back and forth. And Curt doesn't back down at all and looks like a fucking badass, like, standing up to Steve Austin. So, he, even as ridiculous as he made himself look in the ring at times, he was from that generation of guys who still knew how to protect his stock. And like,
he felt tough. Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And he took that into WCW too. He's still like, he was a dude and like someone that people knew. It's just like physically, his time had passed him by, and also just like where the game was at that point. Who wants to see Mr. Perfect in the NWO? Like, it's just like it wasn't.
And that's fine, right? That's okay. I think I'm glad we're having this conversation because I think sometimes there's like people take that stuff so seriously. The idea of a guy falling off, you see it all the time now. When people talk about legacies are being tarnished, brother. Go back through wrestling history. All of these guys end up being bad. They all embarrass themselves in some way or another, and that's fine.
I'm ready to say that Chris Jericho was never good. That's where I'm at with him right now. So,
well, yeah, that one's more complicated, I guess.
Well,
but you get the point,
years, right? I'll say that.
That's
a long
another
time.
show. It's another show for another. But you get my point. Like,
yes,
wrestling fans are great at remembering people the way they were. Is my point. Alex, what you gonna say?
Well, and you pontificated in a way I'd never really thought about. He was still trying to be Mr. Perfect, and that's what hurt him.
Yeah.
Scott Hall in WCW was so different than Razor Ramon. And I know, like, yes, he walked out and he did this shit. Like, yeah, that was the same. And Kevin Nash was so far away from Diesel. And that's just the whole point of, like, that's what I mean when I say he just tried to be Mr. Perfect in the NWO. And who the fuck wants to see that? Because I don't know if he could have been anything else at that point, And it's a shame. It sucks. But yeah, he obviously physically was shot, and dude, Kota Ibushi is washed as fuck, and I never want to see that guy wrestle again, but he was still fucking Kota Ibushi. People need to understand you can separate these things. It's just
can. If you're looking for your favorite wrestler to have a happy ending where they go out on top, you're not going to have many favorite wrestlers, bro. It's just part of the game. It is what it is,
Whoever. I'm trying to think.
Exactly. It's just a
Kobashi, maybe?
It's part of wrestling, and I'm still glad that we're able to be honest about when a guy did drop off and when a guy did, kind of lose their way, because it's the reality of the game. It's next guy up, right?
I watched Sting in 2023, okay? His last few matches were awesome, but listen, I watched that fella last year.
He was ready to go, wasn't he? Bless him. And he knew it, so he said it. He said it was time.
I watched that match he had with fucking Magnus in 2013, and come on, man. That guy was begging to be taken out to pasture.
The point here, folks, being if you stick around long enough, there are going to be some lows to accompany the highs, and that's part of the journey. And we'll get into kind of Curt's overall legacy in it, but I think it says a lot how fondly he's remembered. That's the main thing, right?
Yeah.
And to pull this around to a positive spin, there ain't many wrestlers you can say, like, we watched these 3 different acts, and like I stick by what I said. He's a different wrestler in all 3 of them.
Yeah.
Like, it's there aren't many guys you can say that about. And
the third act is almost like a marriage of the first 2. It's very interesting when you look at it through it that way. Very, very interesting. This is a fun question we'll kick around before we wrap up. was there ever a point where he could have won the WWF title and could it have worked? This is relevant because it is one of the things he's most associated with is being one of the famous, didn't win the big one, quote unquote. I don't know if it would have fit in that time, if I'm completely honest.
Yeah, the closest
Yeah.
play would have been the 92-93 run, but I don't think it would have worked.
No.
Yeah, I think Rude was closer, actually. I think Rick was closer.
Yeah.
I think... Now, granted, Rick's big issue was Hogan didn't want to work with him, so...
Brother. Yeah. Okay, so we can use this now to talk about this as we look towards the ending here. The thing with Perfect, I agree with Oracle. 92, 93, when he was a bit more grounded. Yeah. Because no one's going to believe this guy can beat Hulk Hogan when Tito Santana's making him do backflips off of clotheslines and shit.
Yeah,
and that's that's so before I don't mean to take over your show, Joe, but I think an interesting thing we can talk about here before we move to the positives is we already mentioned the heel 88 to 91 Mr. Perfect style of selling and wrestling. There have been a lot of negatives, not negatives, but a lot of people took the wrong things away from it. And I think that's so important to call out of like, I remember reading someone review a Dolph Ziggler match with Zack Ryder one time where Ryder gave him a monkey flip and Ziggler 450'd out of it and landed on his face. Like that was the sell. And it was like, why would I ever believe this guy can beat John Cena if Zack Ryder can hurt him that bad? Mm-hmm. And that's like, I know there's someone listening to this right now being like, it's fucking fake, Young Bucks rule. But it's like, it's true. Like, if you think about the average fan, and to my surprise, we're in a place where we can start talking about that because there's clearly people that are coming in and out now.
Yeah, they're back.
I got a buddy at work. I said, you watched that angle last night? And he said, oh yeah, Cody bladed. I said, yeah. He said, and that Punk segment. I'm telling you, man.
People are watching again. Yeah, I've noticed it too.
But it's like I'll use Bill Ospreay as my example of, and y'all know I've done a complete 180 on that guy, and I think he should get the rocket on him, go up there, be at the top of the company. But like if he, I fear if he was in a match with like a team with like the Acclaimed or something, he would sell that shit the way he would for Kenny Omega.
He would.
And that's like that's all that does is hurt you, brother. And I that's where we come from, this Hennig thing of like, yeah, it was fun in the Big Boss Man match. And what you have to understand is that inherently there are people, even though it's fake, and even in today's time when people know it's just fake bullshit, will not take you as a serious threat if guy down here can damage you as much as guy up here. And so I think it's an interesting takeaway from this of and almost like Hennig in his selling is almost celebrated today in like a comedic sense, but you have to wonder how, and Terry was not going to lose to anybody. The only person he was going to lose to is the guy he could say, I told you it wasn't going to work, and that's why he lost to Warrior. But you have to wonder if Perfect could have reached a higher level in that company if he brought some of that AWA badass to the character as opposed to just like...
Wasn't I believe it's like been said that they didn't draw those matches with Hogan, right? Which I think speaks to what you're saying. I don't know if people bought it, unfortunately. Yeah. It's just it's an interesting thing to kind of ponder, and that's me and Oracle go off in our group chat sometimes just about the annoying way people sell shit, and it's just like this. It's okay. So from 1989 to 91, Mr. Perfect. People don't want to believe this, but it means the same thing today. Like if you make yourself look like an asshole in the ring, like people are going to take note about that and inevitably not take you as seriously as other people. Yeah, it's almost a subconscious thing for people, I think. I think go on, Oracle. Go.
Sorry, it's
no,
like,
you could go.
If there are levels to it, it's called hierarchy. it's okay if PG-13 wants to sell Goofy for somebody, you know?
Yeah.
Like Jamie Dundee and Wolfie D or whatever the hell, I can't remember which one is which, but they were awesome, you know? Like them getting squashed on their last night on Raw because they begged, because they begged to have a match with LOD and getting destroyed was awesome. Like, of course that's LOD, but like, and then them going to ECW and like doing stick and like stuff with like Mikey and Spike is awesome. Like that's cool. Like whatever. But like, I don't know. Like, there's levels to this. Like, you got to have, for example, I don't know. Let's just use Arn Anderson. In that match that Ricky Steamboat comes back in.
Yep.
Arn sells not for Dustin. They're picking on Dustin.
It's
but Ricky Steamboat. There's a hierarchy there. That's Ricky Steamboat.
Yeah,
that's a former world champion.
He's
Ricky
just a man.
Steamboat, thorn on our side. He's just a man. He's just a man.
Yeah.
Like you have to react to certain people. There's a.
I agree.
There's a level to it. You have to understand that.
And I think while he is the most obvious Hennig tribute act, I think Dolph has been able to age more gracefully because I think he actually realized that at some point. Now, Dolph will still take big bump. I think to me, his best work is like when he does the 2014 babyface stuff. And I think he's like noticeably better at not just being a complete,
super ball.
Yeah, because when he's first he's first trying to get himself noticed as a heel. He's doing the full Hennig. Like every bump is like ridiculous, And it's something that I think he kind of wrestled with, and I'm sure his body told him to slow down on that too, But it's a real thing, and it's very, very common now. And I think bumping and selling, of course, is an incredible art form. But I do think when you get to the point where it is like the focus of everyone watching what you're doing on the sell, I think you're kind of defeating the object on some level. It's got to be careful with it. There's a time and a place for it, certainly. But
I'm not. And there's to be fair, there's more detail to it. I'd have to watch matches, but sometimes even our old beloved Vader would bump around a little bit too much for somebody to be like, all right, Leon,
sure. It's a nuance thing, definitely.
And it's in closing, Oracle and I we'll be here till 3 a.m. But like, look, you need Jack Evans's. And I'm perfectly content with Jack Evans selling a Yakuza kick by doing a corkscrew shooting star. But we're talking about Mr. Perfect here, and we're talking about someone that people thought should have been like the guy and like a main eventer. And that's where the line gets drawn, is like you're going to have a hard time being a main eventer doing that kind of like borderline shtick.
If you want main event Curt Hennig, I'll tell you what, 82 to 88. Especially like 85 to 88, dude was special. I mean, he was a great wrestler. To go back, the positive route. Just a tremendous wrestler, and the gimmicks in WWF hindered a lot of people, and I think the gimmick in some ways kind of hurt him. I'm sure it was a conscious decision by him to work the way that he did, to make himself stand out with his bumping and whatnot. But mid 80s Curt Hennig, worth it. Absolutely.
Let's stick with that and kind of wrap up here with just any final thoughts as always. Grappler for March 24. Bobby, any final thoughts on the legacy of Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig? Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the more unique cases because kind of like we talked about, it's a short peak, but like he's a guy, he's always going to be in the video games now. He's always going to be, remembered fondly in WWE.
Yeah.
When the DVD was coming out, they had Charlie Haas go to Dave & Buster's and recreate the skits. That was always really funny. Curtis Axel got 7 or 8 year run there that they kind of played up. They had him win the Intercontinental title on Father's Day and all that. And it's cool, man. It's cool that, he's got this legacy that lasts, and he's going to be, one of the WWF greats for forever, pretty much.
It's a good point. And that character is absolutely one of the in-house iconic figures they always point to, So it's like, I don't know what Kurt's approach was. We were just talking about him and not being a tippy top guy there, but like, I don't know if he cared necessarily, right? Like, I don't know what his approach was.
The checks were clearing in those days, brother.
Yeah, it's we talk about it a lot. It's always fascinating where these guys' legacies age and such. With that in mind, Oracle, I know you kind of just talked about quite a bit there, but anything else you'd like to add when it comes to final thoughts on Hennig?
No, I mean, he was just, I'm a huge proponent of 80s Curt Hennig.
Yep.
The Prince Perfect gimmick was awesome. There are some gems there in the 90s, and of course that Bret match from King of 93 is special. What a classic.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Alex, any closing thoughts on Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig?
Wrestled at a Starrcade and a WrestleMania. There's only a handful of people walking the earth that can say they did that. Bobby, and also, they got Wade Boggs to come in and induct him into the Hall of Fame, so he's got the shoot sports tie in there. Hennig was a great wrestler. He was a prodigy, obviously. His AWA work, as I've mentioned time and time again, was a revelation. He wrestled in the Tokyo Dome in 1990, and in 2002 wrestled in the ECW arena against Jerry Lawler. So it's like he's a guy who did it all, saw it all. In some ways, a cautionary tale, but in if you take the right things away, an example that you can be a star and be just in the mid card. We're in a time right now where everyone is so fucking obsessed with everyone being pushed, and this guy needs to be the main eventer, or pretending that you care about somebody. In a case like fucking Mr. Perfect, those crowds did care about him. They wanted to boo the shit out of him when he was like in the second or third match on the show. They want to see the big boss man kick his ass. So like I said, he's a guy that there were he's a guy that the wrong lessons were taken from in some cases, but there's a lot of good lessons to take from him too. And like countless others, a guy who just way too early became a spent force, just the way he pushed himself and whatnot. But when he was on, an exceptional talent, and has a hell of a catalog that he left behind. And every time we do these recency bias and whatnot, then I think about like the structure of the matches. But this was a really unique one, because for the last time, I promise I'll say, it really did feel like a tale of three different wrestlers in this. And and we've done like Terry Funk and people where that's the case also, but this was an interesting one because I didn't really see it coming in that sense, because my brain so far separates everything. So watching it all in matrimony was a good experience. So yet another legend, yet another Hall of Famer added to the halls of Grin Grappler.
Yeah, absolutely. I've often the dreaded overrated word is not one I'm going to use this evening, but I sometimes in the past when folks have talked about where Curt stands to them all the time, I've kind of gone, I don't know, and I still feel that way on an analytical fucking nerd level, but whenever we do these, I think you get a better appreciation for rather than trying to figure out what you don't like about someone, realizing what the reason people loved him so much, he is truly a beloved piece of wrestling history. And I think when you actually consider how brief his major league prime is, we'll say, because a lot of people haven't seen the AWA stuff, which is what we deem his prime. I think that says a lot about the impact he had on people. I'm a fan, will always be a fan for the Bret matches in particular. He definitely has his quirks that drive me crazy, and I do sometimes ponder if he's a little bit overstated historically. But I am more and more, as I get older and maybe wiser, God forbid, I don't think that's a real thing. The more I ponder wrestling, what does it mean to be overstated historically? If you connected with people to that degree, if you made people feel the way the way people talk about you 20 years later, why to say it's not earned, right? Like, you did it, man. You made it happen. And I think we've analyzed the good, the bad, the great, and a whole lot in between with Curt Hennig. But the reality is, many people immediately cite him as like their favorite wrestler. And he was never a top guy necessarily. He had around 3 years in the WWF where he was really on his game. And people remember him that way. And he has matches that will live forever. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So, gone way too soon. Whenever I think of Kurt, I always think of that interview he did after Rick Rude died, where he called it like a wake up lesson, and you kind of you wish it could have been, right? It's a shame,
Yep.
but too many of those guys went far too young. But what a legacy left behind, to the point where in 2024 we're trying to figure out his impact on professional wrestling, whether it was good or bad. It's a great conversation to have. It says a lot, right? So thrilled to have done this one. 7 years span across the 6 matches, and as Alex has said, he's like transforms along the way. Very, very unique career, and I hope we did it justice tonight, folks. So there it is. Grin Grappler, Mr. Perfect Curt Hennig. Now, before we get out of here, we need to pick our grappler for next month, fellas. It's an interesting one. And here are the candidates. Bob, lock in. You obviously get first say on these as always. Otherwise, you don't show up to the next show. All right. Someone who actually just came up when we were looking for a good Curt Hennig WCW match.
Chris Benoit?
Not quite. Is Diamond Dallas Page is the candidate. We have a recent subject of Dark Side of the Ring, Bam Bam Terry Gordy.
Ooh.
Which could be interesting. Talk about a guy who's a prodigy, my God. Harley Race of Triple H cosplay fame, for anyone who's not aware. And we have 2 famed rivals of the modern era who would make for very different episodes, I think, and one of which may cause a fist fight live on the air. We have John Cena and Randy Orton to close out our potential grapplers. So we have Harley, Terry, DDP, Orton, and Cena. Those are our options, Bob. Where do you immediately lean?
Immediately, I think I go with Terry Gordy. He's
Bam Bam.
Yeah. I haven't seen a lot of him. Obviously, he's in the public space again with the Dark Side of the Ring coming out. He's relevant. My only thing with DDP is, we've done the Goldberg match. I think we've done a couple others, so that might be a little tough.
Yeah.
Not really any interest in doing Cena or Orton, unfortunately. So I'll go with Terry Gordy.
Terry Gordy. All right. Alex, where do you lean on this one? Terry, what do you think?
Yeah, with Page, I don't know how you break that up. He's had some good matches, but we already did the Goldberg match and we did the Sting Nitro match. So two of his all timers are. Yeah. And then I don't want to watch 6 Randy Orton matches.
That one would get so nasty so quick. I would hit 30 minutes and I'd say, Oracle, you're hosting. Fuck, I'm gone. I'm leaving.
Cena, we could put together an interesting lineup, but there was back when we started this, there was, I think in one of the post shows, I think we fantasy booked a Terry Gordy one of these. So I think for the continuity of it, we'd have to stick with it. As long as we end with Miracle Violence connection against the Eliminators in ECW.
It feels like if ever there was a time to do Terry Gordy, this is it, right? We can always do Cena, we can do Orton.
As someone who, my mother was born and raised in Chattanooga. I lived in Chattanooga, Tennessee, in the area from the summer of 2000 until the new year of 2018. So yeah, we're going Terry Bam Bam Gordy brothers.
Got some All Japan on the docket, brother.
And I will post a link. It was up on YouTube a while. I saw what very well may have been his final match. Saw him days before he died, just a few days before he died. We will not put that on. That will not be in our. But
want to note that I think Alex was laughing at a comment.
Oh yeah, I was laughing at a comment. I'm sorry.
Okay, no, I am. I am proud to say, and I will post the link. The match is obviously not very good, but I will post the link if I can still find it. I believe I saw his last match, if not his second to last match. Just maybe it might have been a week tops before he passed. So I'm very pleased to say that I got to see Terry Bam Bam Gordy wrestle in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Well, East Ridge technically, in his hometown. I take honestly as a nerd wrestling fan, I take pride in that I got to see Terry wrestle in his hometown. So yes, we are definitely doing that.
I'll get some dip for it, so I can just have Shaw in front of Bill Mercer, and just get ready for it.
That'll be fun. I'm excited for that. Grin Grappler, Terry Gordy, folks. That's up next. We hope you've enjoyed this. If you're watching I know a lot of folks are joining us on Twitter these days in the space, which as someone who's never been in a Twitter space, I have no fucking clue how easy or enjoyable that is. But if you like the show, God bless. The archive will always live on YouTube. If you can go over there and give us a thumbs up, that's very much appreciated. Same to folks watching on Twitch. Bobby, do you have any plugs, promotions, so on and so forth?
Yes, this Friday, Late Night Grin returns. We're previewing WrestleMania XL. Believe it'll probably just be the three of us. Alex, if you're not busy Friday, feel free. Maybe Jack will be there. Who knows?
We got a lineup, bro. We got us. We got the Fed Free. We got Jackie Crosby is booked. He could always just cancel. Yeah. We also got Chris Bourdon, friend of the show, coming.
Oh, hell yeah!
Okay. If Alex wants to come, he can be there too. I mean, we got a whole squad coming up.
But yeah,
Alex is going to start talking about the Usos match, and then he's going to start yelling at me. It's just
hey.
It's just him, bro.
I've settled in my position now.
I don't want to derail the close here, but I'll never forget. We were watching the Rumble at my brother's, and my sister-in-law was like, "Why don't y'all do that to each other? So you give you like before you guys fight." She's like,
"It was very unfortunate,
because like they did the Rumble spot where they just did this."
There was a lot of things on the Rumble that were set up expecting a very different response than they got, and that was one of the league leaders in that regard. That was a weird show, dude. Very weird.
Yes.
The men's Rumble was actually uncomfortable to watch at times, the way the crowd took it. It was genuinely weird. But nonetheless, that's Friday. Oracle, anything else you'd like to push and promote, mate?
I'll be here Friday. Traveling down to my folks from Knoxville to Chattanooga, where they are for Easter weekend. I will absolutely be on. I shouldn't be. I mean, I guess it's possible I may come in 15, 20 minutes late, but I don't think it'd be any later than that. I'll be there Friday with everybody. But, to preview Mania, I'm hoping that they get the last couple of matches that it looks like they're building to announced, so we can get a full clean slate on the preview. We might have a match or two that we're missing still, but I feel like
we'll be mostly good.
I feel like the last couple of matches might be fixed in. Or at least close to it by the end of Friday Night SmackDown. So, but that's next on the docket. So excited for it.
Love it. Alex, what's the latest on the Contrarians front, mate? What we got?
Well, just this week we dropped episode 200. It was part 2 of our Kill Bill Volume 1 and Volume 2. Our friend Chaz Fisher from Draft Zero in Australia, he guested on that with us. And recently we also did the 2009 Friday the 13th remake, which I absolutely fucking detest, and Julio is positive on. So we went hell for leather on that one. Coming up next week is our WrestleMania bonus episode of Fighting with My Family, the biopic on Paige. So that's
Florence Pugh.
It's a fine movie. It's just, as Joey put it perfectly, Paige having a biopic has aged hilariously. But yeah, we got that coming up. Patreon.com/Contrarian Prime, $1 pledge. We got our goals right now. Once we cross, we'll be doing some Patreon exclusive mini series. As always, at Contrarian Prime on Twitter, Facebook.com/Contrarian Prime, YouTube.com/@Contrarian Prime, and just go to our Twitter. You'll find everything. Julio runs that. It's way more organized than if I did it. I always appreciate y'all letting me come on and plug that little film podcast I do. And if I may, this is the last show we're going to be doing beforehand, so I'd just like to send a message out to that punk-ass bitch, Roman Reigns. You got 12 more days with that title, brother. You better hold it tight, because there's going to be a story finished in Philadelphia, and I'm taking a gun with me, and I'm going to shoot it in the air, or maybe, we'll see where it goes. But Tell my friends, I'm bringing fireworks and a gun. We'll see which one I use depending how Sunday night ends. So, yeah, I'll acknowledge you for a few more days, but it's coming to an end, brother.
Yeah,
But with the final boss in there, though, who knows?
hard to say. I'm sure that'll age great. That triumphant speech you just gave there. I think you'll be fine. I think so.
I don't know. Roman's facial expressions lately of his efforts of.
He's in his stand-up sharp and fight me era, bro. He'd rather be anywhere else in the world.
I have no choice but to respect him, realizing it's like over, so he's just gonna phone it in as much as possible.
Yeah. Someone on my timeline said it. I forget who it was, so I apologize. They were like, he's realized he's not going to get the pin on Saturday and he's going to get pinned on Sunday. And he's like, well, fuck this. This is for losers, dude. Good luck. All right. Anyway, there's a little bit of a preview of our preview there, folks. This Friday. Late Night Grin. Same place, same time. You know the deal by now. Following Rampage, which I think is on again this week, 11:05 Eastern. Good times. If you didn't see last week's show, we talked about Nick Bockwinkel for like 20 minutes for no real reason, just because we were seeking the casual fan. But yes, as I said, give us the thumbs up and the subscribe and all those YouTube-y things that we're supposed to do on the YouTube. We'll see you Friday, folks. Keep grinning, all how, and enjoy this intro. Have a great night, everyone.